special call work session of December 8th, 2021. We need a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, Ms. Didrich, and a second. David Stribinger. Any discussion? All right, just you can raise your hand. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The agenda is approved unanimously. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here we go. Please be seated. The video is properly notified. And we will now begin our workshop with Peggy Torre, who has worked with the board in the past and is back here with us today to try to continue our implementation of coherent governance with fidelity. Peggy.
Great. It is great to be with y'all. It's been wonderful actually speaking with each of you individually as well as some of the staff. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to give out a summary of your remarks. And as I told you, nothing is attributed to anybody. It's just a summary of everything that was said. And I want you to take a few minutes and just kind of look through there. And then we're going to talk about some of the themes and things that you saw. And then we're going to delve into some particular things, okay? But I want you to see the summaries first. Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Is that enough for everyone? I'm scanning. Okay. That's fine. We can. Do you have it electronic?
I do, but I'm screen sharing.
Do you want that in context? We didn't put that. So we can put it in earlier. You guys. Okay. Most of you are done. Let's take one more minute and finish. Okay, probably should have told you this before you read all that. I was able to talk with them except for one. And so this is input from a lot of folks. We're going to take this information and information that I've gathered from staff and from reading minutes and other things and spend some time today on a number of those issues. But I first wanted to get some of your reactions to what you just read. What did you see? Anything just sort of pop out at you? Pretty much what you expected to see or not?
I do.
Okay, Earl?
Right. I agree with most of this. Some of it I don't agree with.
Okay,
Because I think like, one person comment with me, spend too much time, meetings too long. Well, if you know that, I've been saying that for years. Then, but I think we need to, I mean, for me, I don't ask a bunch of questions because I've been around long enough to know what's going on. So, like for instance, when you have a committee meeting, question asked and you come back to bring it to the board to ask the same question. That don't make sense.
Right. Right.
That's what I mean.
And if you notice, there was a suggestion here that if you had a question and you knew you were going to have a question about something that was coming up, that you send it ahead of time to either Frank or to Tina, which, is a great idea. And that way, if they can answer ahead of time, great. And if not, they can make sure you listen. But, so that's one way to deal with that. What else did you see? Yep, Adrian.
When you're looking for red cars, you see the red cars. Results focus. Several times it was mentioned there. We need results.
Absolutely.
And we've been denied that because of COVID.
Right.
So I think we're anxious to get to the
Time to
point.
get back there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
To where we just look at numbers. It's easy. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to debate it. It's
Yep.
right there. So that jumped out at me.
Okay.
That's what I'm focused on.
Yep, that was certainly a theme. We're going to talk about that during the day. What else? Yep.
I think across the board, it seems that the, as any, that needs to be worked on it before, it seems like the superintendent got pretty good reviews again in the community, so, all eyes on us.
Okay.
I think the idea of parliamentarian kept coming up throughout here in different questions, and I think we probably would agree that the reason we need one is not, it's because of an outline. I think that the rest of the board follows the, that's pretty well in response to the chair running the meeting and committee, heads of committees. So
We're going to circle back. If you want to go to the agenda, the next page, we're going to circle back. If you look at the agenda that I think you have in your folders and up here, at the end, we're going to circle back to that. So hold that thought, Kathy, because we are going to talk about board meetings. That seemed to be one of the things that came up across the board, as well as some of these other pieces. So we will spend some time on that. Okay. What else?
One of the concerns is repeating what someone else has said, and that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. I agree with Ingrid that it's board work that needs that, as evidenced by the recent contract. I mean, everybody's fairly pleased and very pleased with Dr. Rodriguez's work. And once we come out of COVID, we can really, jump out of the gate. But we need to work on our processes and committee work and what is the real focus of what a committee should be doing.
Yep, we're going to talk about that a lot today. And that sort of goes hand in hand with the results focus, okay? Sort of an interesting departure on your committee work and the results piece really need to be talked about together. So we will do that. Yep. Yep.
All the time we spend on the policy manual. And what have we gotten out of it?
It's this guy, right?
We got a big book,
I read it.
a lot of energy.
Yep.
A lot of good thought. And I hope for one, that we don't go through that at that level of detail. It seems to me that we leave it, that darn thing alone, operate on it for a year, and then scan through it to see if, are we still doing that? Is that still required? Throw it out? Or if there's something else that we're doing, put it in. But everybody has a finite amount of energy. We spent too much energy this last year and a half in that policy manual, in my opinion.
Yep.
From what we're getting out of it.
Understood. And I think, one of the things we're also going to talk about is how you need to spend your time and energy. And, as you said, we all have a finite amount, and we have a lot of other responsibilities besides the school board. So, I think making sure that the focus is there where it needs to be is something that we need to chat about. So we'll be back. Okay, Eugene.
Playing off what Dick said. One of the things we seem to have a tendency to do is say, let's send that policy. Send the policy committee.
Lucky policy.
And if we're gonna, after a few years, we're gonna have 3 or 4 binders.
Right.
And that's not gonna work.
No.
Because that's Dick pointed out.
Hello.
Too big already, probably. but,
Well, and, one of the things that, hey, Mel, it's sort of sad that I know all your names, what you say about us. Actually, I'm glad to be back. It's wonderful. Let me give you one of these. We are going to spend some time talking about how much detail you need, okay? And we may all disagree about that, and that's okay. But we are going to talk about it from the perspective of this, okay? And it's a really fine line. So, finding that line is always tough. And I think you may be a little over the line, but you may disagree. Okay? Yep, yeah.
I think, we was on the policy committee, we put this together and we just kind of merged our PEs with OEs and took what we had. And we thought we went through it one by one and all good. Not until we went to operationalize it, like when we're asking for the superintendent's interpretation. I know an academic committee, we're looking at them like, well, these are pretty much the same. There's a lot of redundancies in there. And I think, I attended the training, the Aspen training on Monday. And when I talked about that we had, an instructional OE with 17 subparts, the lady was just like, oh my gosh.
We're gonna, you see this?
And one other thing, if I can interject here, just for the good group, I asked specifically if it was appropriate, how we, with governance, with coherent governance, if we approve it, we own it. Remember that big discussion? And she said, I asked, could we take a vote of support like we did before? And does that take away the superintendent's power? And the answer was absolutely, you can take away the support. And it does not take the power away from the superintendent. So I just wanted to say that out there because, we have an issue with that when we did it before. So
I think one of the things, and we're going to get to that as you see on the agenda, but I think there's a real murky understanding, I won't say misunderstanding, but murky understanding of OEs, okay? If you remember, and we'll just set this up front and we'll get to it, the weeds in a bit. OEs are your way of putting parameters around the operational organization. All right, you come up with an OE to tell Frank the standards, okay? What he needs to do and what he doesn't do. But up at a high level, okay? You don't need one for every little particular thing. So we're gonna talk about that. I think you've probably got more than you need. And I think you're at a level, a granular level that's probably below where you need to be working. So we'll come. Just a second, Tina, you raise your hand before.
All right, so looking at the, that way you just provided us the summary of the answers to interview questions. I mean, I clearly think the vast majority, the super majority of the board is on the same page. And we have, I think, the right mindset of, what we would like to accomplish. And we are trying very hard to get there as a group. We have an excellent superintendent leading the district. I just think we have to be very mindful, and it comes out in these answers. We must persevere despite having an outlier. And I think that has to be, unfortunately, I think the public sees the nonsense, because I hear about it, from people. And they see that side, they have no clue of all the things that we've already done. This is my answer, I'll read it to you.
You're proud of that answer, aren't you?
Yeah, it's like, okay, despite differences among members, we have accomplished a lot, fully implemented the governance model, hired top-notch superintendent who has good relationship with the community, passed the referendum by a landslide, done well with annual audits, in good financial shape. Unfortunately, sometimes all the public sees is a nonsense. We have to get past that. That is the real problem.
Well, and let me just say that every board has outliers. Every board. Now, they may not be quite far out, as a particular board, but every board has outliers. And, the reality is you can't choose the people that you're going to work with on your board. The public chooses those folks. So finding ways to work within that structure like this, finding ways to enforce that and make sure everybody understands that it's not personal, it's not issue driven, it's the rules that we've agreed to operate on. Okay, so we will talk about that in ways to kind of make sure that the business gets done.
Right.
Regardless of who's there.
So we need to call on Dr. Wisniewski, who's participating remotely.
Oh.
Rachel?
Rachel?
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Sorry, I have my back to you. Just holler when you raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Sorry about that. I was just wondering, because I see the documents in board docs and I've got 3. Is there a synopsis of the responses that's not in board docs, or is there another document? I'm just trying.
There is, and I think they did not put that one in board docs.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll have Molly email it. I can email it to you.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And we're wrapping up on that one as we speak. So, all
Thank
right,
you.
so we're going to talk about. I'm sorry.
No, you talk about the OEs, and I think that one thing, I don't know how Angela feels, a lot of the stuff's gonna go over my head, because I haven't been in this process.
It's fine.
But I think some of the OEs and whatnot, as it were operationalized, I think that are a response to a lot of past problems. So I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, the school board has PTSD, And so I think that it's valuable what you just say, we have turned the corner, but I think everyone's still burdened for past problems. And that's probably why we're like, we need an OE for this, because we've had this problem, and I'm over there going, what problem? So
I know. Gotcha. It's a great observation. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to trust that if we put larger parameters around certain parts of the organization, like safety or facilities or whatever it is that you're talking about, that's enough. Okay. And then that's where the superintendent's interpretation and the compliance pieces come in. Okay. Then if you don't agree with the way he interprets that, or he comes back and is non-compliant, that's where you begin the discussion. But you don't go in and write, policies and OEs for every piece of work.
Yeah, just, following up on that comment around it. I think this, I understand, because I think it's a tendency for organizations, boards, groups, systems, right? To find what was the issue and then drill down into that issue. So we don't have that issue, right?
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, over time, that can become something that holds you back from getting further, right? Getting further ahead. And I think at times we have, and at times we overcompensate for whatever may not have been right.
Sure.
Sure. In order, make sure. And then, the other thing, I think sometimes that lands us with over 200 OEs, right? That have to be reported on, right? Versus, another county that has around 90. Right. And so that there's a big difference there. That
huge. And it's going to overburden the staff. So we really have to talk through that as well. Okay. All right. So we're going to launch into this. If you would go to the next slide. So we're going to start with this whole use of committees issue. Okay. Talk about that first. And we're going to have an activity around this, but I want to go through some of the pieces in the book first. if we can get there. Okay, she's trying. Well, you've got this in front of you, so while she's trying to get it up, just look in your folder. We're on the back of the first page. And I want to just take a minute. I have a ton of quotes in here from the book. We're using this little book. My husband would not like this reference, but this is sort of our Bible, okay? It's our governance Bible. And so we're going to actually quote from the book. So you don't think this is Peggy saying this is the book. So let's take a look on the next slide at several quotes from there. I'm going to read through them very quickly. I know you can read, but I just want to reinforce a little bit. Many boards create committees focused on operational functions, and they have in parens finance, curriculum, facilities. Anything sound familiar here? As vehicles to help management make reasonable decisions about such functions or to oversee the decisions that are made by professional staff. And that's one. Two, this misuse of committees is evidence of a fundamental lack of understanding of the board's role. There is a legitimate place for board committees, but using them to oversee the work of staff in operational areas or to help staff do the work is not among them. Finally, board committees should only be used to do board work. Now, let's stop right there for just a second. What is the work of the board? Let's make sure we're clear on that. Going further. Yes, ma'am.
Oversee our one employee.
Oversee your one employee and.
So we do the hiring, we do the
Okay.
evaluation,
And
we
what-
set him parameters to work within. He comes up with those
Okay,
operational expectations and we approve them.
okay,
Or if we don't approve them, we ask him to work on them some more.
Okay.
Okay, here's our discussion.
okay,
But we're setting policy.
okay,
We are not managing a district.
okay. What else? Nick?
I think we're the conduit to our constituents
Yeah.
and to the political bodies in our area.
Absolutely.
Ditto.
Anything else? You own the mission of this district. Okay? Frank owns how you get there. You own getting there. So the mission is yours. It is overseeing Frank. That's the way one of the ways you're gonna accomplish that. But it's also making sure that you shepherd the mission. Okay? And that's a big, that's an up there thing. And we're gonna kind of talk about the difference between doing it up from up there and doing it, way down here in the weeds. So look at the next one. Should not help staff do the work. If operationally focused committees are needed, their creation should be based on the CEO's initiative, and they should be CEO committees, not board committees. Board's role is to govern, not manage. Okay? We'll talk about the fact that if you think about a strategic plan, y'all know what a strategic plan looks like. You got a mission and you got a vision and you got goals and you got strategies and you got actions. All right. If you think about that big picture, the vision, the mission, and the overall goals are yours. The strategies and the actions are Frank's. Okay, so that's a really easy way to think about the level that you're working on. When you come up with a plan, you get this big stuff first, and then you say, okay, here's how we're going to get there. His piece. Okay? All right, and then we're going to look at a couple more. It's appropriate for the board to have concerns about all kinds of operational matters. Of course you do. Your constituents do as well, and they're going to talk to you about it, right? You have to talk back. But it's inappropriate for the board to exercise control of the organization by approving all important decisions about operational matters by improperly using committees to help the CEO do his job. Okay, we're talking about how you actually worry about those concerns. So the board is not required, and I really like this next phrase, and it would not make any sense to anybody that doesn't understand coherent governance. So let's read it. The board is not required to make decisions or even share in their making in order to control. Now, what does that mean? How do you control it if you don't make them or share?
Policy.
You got your OEs.
Okay, you got your OEs, and what else you got? You got this guy. And you are setting the parameters, okay, for Frank. You're saying within these parameters, you can operate. And remember that OEs have two different parts, what you can do, what you gotta do, and what you can't do. Okay? So within those big pieces, and they have an interesting example in your book. I don't know if you remember this, but it's about the school calendar. You remember that example?
Yep.
Okay, anybody want to talk about that?
We did talk about that at length, but the school calendar is not something, because the state requires the board to approve. Our state requires the board to approve, to adopt the school calendar, I think is the word.
Right, but that can be a perfunctory adoption, okay? It doesn't have to be getting in the weeds of how it's developed.
Yeah, that's right. And I think he just brings it to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you remember, the way it works, and Andrew's looking at me with a puzzled expression, so I'm gonna go through
Those
this.
are my resting
No,
places.
no. Okay, resting, I like it. This is not a resting frown right here. So the idea is, if you are worried about the school calendar, okay, and some places are, particularly beach communities, then you can say, you can put parameters around the calendar. We don't think a school calendar should ever start before X date, okay? We don't think the school calendar should have more than 2 weeks of vacation. I mean, whatever it is you want to say, okay? These big things. Frank, go get the school calendar. So it's these big parameters. Yep.
Okay, so, but we don't need an OE for that.
No.
So then how- Okay, I'm sure you'll get to that.
Exactly. No, we don't need an OE for that. Okay?
Because I'm having a hard time making the
We
jump
can.
from the big picture policy
Right.
to not having a specific OE results section.
Of every single thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Back to our little quotes here. By anticipating in advance the factors that would cause the board, and this is what we were just talking about, to reject administrative recommendations and then committing those shared values to policy, the board sets the parameters within which operational decisions are made. So if you say we can never start before Labor Day, okay? That's a parameter. But you're not going to say we've got to start on September the 11th, whatever it is. Okay? So you're doing this sort of big setting. All right. Now, I want to take just a few minutes and I'm going to divide y'all into some groups. And I've got an activity that I want you to go through, looking at some of your committee work. Okay? We have some committee minutes. I'm going to ask you to look you want groups of 2 or groups of 3? We'll make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Don't forget
6,
about
7, 8,
Rachel.
9, 10. Rachel was 11.
William is on as well.
I'm sorry?
William was also on.
Oh, William, are you with us? Hello?
He was. I
He's
saw
on
his
the
name.
list of-
Well,
He's
on
muted
mute
and he's, can't see him.
Okay, well, William, if you're with us, we would love for you to participate in this. We'll figure out a way to do that if you're interested. And Rachel, we will figure out a way for you to participate as well. Did y'all put the group activity sheets in the, okay. So if you would go, if Rachel, you and William, if you're there, would go to the group activity 1 direction sheet. And I think if y'all will get in groups of 3, that would be great. You can just separate yourself.
It's on page.
Now I'm bringing it to you.
Natural.
That seems natural.
It's page 10. Rachel and William, the group activities on page 10.
Thank you.
That work? And then just. Okay, I'm gonna give y'all copies of this. You can if you want to do it that way.
You want me to share?
Okay, well, Dick, if we're gonna do that, why don't you and Frank come join Kathy and Angela. You are new, and I don't know you. I apologize. There you go.
You don't put Angela and I together in a group, that would be, we'd just be looking at
Simon's
what?
Rachel, have you found the handout?
I think so. I've got, it's just one page. But
It's
maybe,
one page, yep.
okay.
And William, are you, yeah, there you are. Have you found the handout, William? It has small group number 1 directions at the top. And it says committees.
It's like page 10 in the document. It's not numbered, but
Scan.
This is actually.
Oh, everybody got a copy of this?
so Rachel's with you all through.
Yeah, so, I tell you what.
I'll just listen in.
Hang on a second. Tina, would you mind working with Rachel and William on the, okay, so Tina is gonna work with Rachel, you and William. Are you still there? I saw you for a second.
It looks like he dropped off. I was going to say I can just listen because I actually have to go pick up my children from school in just a minute. So I was going to listen in
Okay.
for this part.
Okay, all right. We'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, so, sorry, Nick. You're making your steps today, right? All right, so you've got about 10 minutes. I want you to look through this page and I want you to look through your committee minutes that you have in front of you now. You should have in front of you now. Everybody have committee minutes? Yes, yes?
So
Yes.
they're a group of,
Yes.
the committee minutes are in your folder.
You're in the folder that you got when you came in. Yep. And I want you to answer these questions in your group, okay?
What percentage of meetings is focused on?
So the different committees. He's here.
And I'm giving you more clues. Are you excited?
William's here.
I'm sorry.
Is he coming?
Oh, good.
Finance.
Do you have a folder?
I did.
Well, I think they're just different. I did all the,
This first one is.
Just choose one. It doesn't matter.
yeah.
Choose a committee, any committee.
I just ran a whole month of October on this committee.
Well, the first one.
Yeah, first one.
Chairman's report. We're talking about the superintendent.
He's talking to some.
Yes, well, it's not on this. Department of Defense Education. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to
This is
study.
like an
the agenda.
outlier. Yeah, this is- it's hard to see.
How about one of you guys?
Let's do.
Yeah. Which one is this? Next one is.
This is operations. That works. You'd rather we do the technology. That's my.
She said she was just gonna listen. She's gonna do it. So you don't mind. And I'll bring you some scratch. It's always good. And that's that's what I say. Summary. Summary. No.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Like, it's very interesting.
And so we take each one of those individually. Yes.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you're looking at results.
Right, you know what I mean?
Well, and that's why maybe we come back here and just take two wick, all these, or these are the shalls and shall nots. And just. Or you respond to that. Just that. I know how much work that is.
Oh,
Oh, it is. Yeah.
all of those.
And it's good to- Yeah, when we sit there and go through it, it's tedious.
Technology to get towards, student outcome. You guys really-
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the technology supports other areas. It doesn't have. That's its goal. You could look at some of the old things.
Listen to your shoes. What she said.
Yeah, that's what.
So, we have our shells, and shall not. So, I mean, shells.
Oh, yeah.
So, these are parameters.
Sign.
So you just have to respond. You don't have to do it.
Oh, you do.
For the whole thing, not for each individual one, yes,
One.
yes,
It could be done.
yes, yes, because it's driving you crazy when we do this, and you know how much work it's causing for me. Because I know it is. So that's- And I know, like, remember, we were talking about. These are the same.
Yeah, you said they can different areas, finance, operations, academics.
Statements. and
Just
just
bring
take
it
it
out.
out.
Actually, don't.
Each one, not as individuals. I'm-
And I think it's big resistance.
So committees. Because that. Well. Yes.
Student achievement, not to say that we're right or wrong. Student achievement.
This is one of
They
the
still
worksheets I
have.
think we got resolved today.
Yes, and so what we're saying is.
I think we should know the workshop.
Basically.
Or charter.
Yeah.
Well,
You know, I mean, I tend to think we should know it, but not direct
it's pretty much the same. But I think.
I should say
Or direct them.
those job duties.
Each one of these subparts, and that's the mistake.
Suits.
Yes, because we're real.
Right here.
Yes, yes.
The constituents.
That's the interpretation right there.
So the committee should just.
Well, anytime.
It's
We
contrary.
may say, what's our land law?
They expect you to know.
Okay.
I go to the class meeting.
Yeah.
There's no way not people. So that's, I would say almost everything on.
Yeah.
Everything looks good.
Not focused on results.
Right.
If it becomes a bigger issue.
To go through this problem.
This time, oh my gosh.
Overseas, we're not supposed to oversee.
That's an easy thing where we talk about weekly names.
That's why we read that.
You know, there's that, it's our responsibility. And to have that,
Technology.
or to watch, you know, something. Yeah.
I'll watch it later.
But not to ask to be rehashed, even do Can I or will? So, okay.
We tend to do that. We talk about.
So the OPs are real ways to explain. So choose them as operational. If you're saying you can do that.
So not.
Yeah. Y'all are saying, right, once you do this, you don't have to do that. Okay, you may look at it, you know.
So they say.
You don't want to be.
Yeah. Let's go back.
That goes with, sorry, that goes with next. So actually, it's making, so we've got the standing, we've got members identified, and we also just. And it wants to bring us.
I
would love that too.
You say, I'm seeking and I'll tell you.
Yeah, but we don't need these. Because what we're is minutia ones. So we would,
Other than that was not.
Yes.
Yes.
But not all.
Not all of these.
You can figure it out. Oh, no, no, no.
So you have that. I always wonder what you think we should mention. I always want to hear what you say. And I'm pretty sure, and I think we can educate, so I hope you just been done us for that. So, yeah, so.
That's why I don't go to the academic.
So how we. Based on.
First, I guess, we don't have to decide that, but what I would say is, I guess that we need a superintendent's interpretation to this. So, superintendent shall maintain a program of instruction offers challenging. For all students.
To the board.
Results policies.
Now, it says actions in the future.
Yes.
Because those might be.
So then different-
Salesforce.
So that's where that's used, right?
Yes.
But there's no time in court, it's already that whole thing, does that, they should that happen? So two. And how about the update on preliminary? And the question was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, probably.
So.
That is a big issue. Remember the one said, once you read it, next part stays in the law, next to the rest. And that is happening.
I know there's
All right.
Number 3 on here. Are we supposed to?
Yeah.
I mean.
No, I guess that's a separate question.
You have to tell us, this is what I need to do that. And you do what you get.
Okay, so it's probably going into that.
Yeah.
The expectation.
Yeah, I mean, the issue.
You know, we haven't done the.
Right.
Yeah, they were saying. You know, we've done that.
There's a lot of. But.
This is when you probably presented the change.
That's a little bit of an issue.
With board of pride.
We can. But anyway, that's another.
One of the things we really need to know.
And if you don't have.
That's what you're
Okay, so once you get enough, it's-
Then you have to take.
I think that was awesome.
And then I'm doing agreement, this is what I'd like to find more money.
You'll say, this is always question about general interpretations which we have already. It's one of our votes. But specifically what we want.
The superintendent, when they're trying to say, this is what I need to do, this is what I'm doing. So that trust is the next. And then we gotta talk. So that's why he's gotta continue to talk. And not have something. Lines.
Reason, but you're.
We didn't say.
That made sense.
Because trust is fragile. And as long as it's I have a problem. I keep you informed, but there's an issue.
Well, that was part of.
But that's part of the.
But she didn't understand.
The job.
As long as.
We actually got to find another trust. But
That was the problem. We were on.
I'm thinking out of that.
I knew what you were.
Here, ask again. That's for the cameras. Same damn.
The CEO picks
They don't approve any changes, but they have a discussion.
Although I noticed you're going to try to say, it's the same.
Based on.
I agree. Because it's.
So let's operational. So if we had, let's just say, the name, say. Finance, operation, instruction. Then Frank will say, okay. Oh, so whatever issues came up, Frank will say, the HR issue or something, I want this committee, I want a committee.
It's for days.
Yes. Yes.
Aaron report, so we're talking about regional advocacy.
From day one, those people. Right, which is another, issue, which is informational. Just.
We nominated.
Also. A lot of stuff that Frank presents.
Okay, and it's, that's great. I just volunteer. Like, which committee do you have?
I didn't ask her that. I have the option. And then select, but it wasn't. Here are each one.
Okay.
I was. And then I got this stuff. First names from.
It's like, for you, you're gonna. It's an issue. At the same time, I certainly. Questioning. It's gonna say that's study. I don't think there is. Yeah.
But no, that's true.
Right, that's true. And that's right, exactly. It's at the top of the stage. That's critical. Yeah. Right. I totally
Once it's leaked out.
agree.
Yes, that's what I said.
But this is what.
And then, yeah. Things like that. But that's cool. I know how we got off. I said, most of these meetings were Betty. In Betty, superintendent's interpretation of each and how we measure. And I know in academics, that's where we got into some things. It's not that way. Didn't achieve the interpretation, but it was the Betty. It's like, we don't think that's a measure what you're saying. And again, these are very minuscule. I think it's things, right? Real
Should. I always.
Good.
I always attract.
All these boring ones, I'm just looking at very tiny. Instruction. But yeah, in instruction, they have 14 of us. And they, like I said, bars. It's a big thing. Help yourself, Molly. That's why I brought some.
You're not. I don't say that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, we have data.
that's murky water. And I looked around and I was like, oh, dang, babe. Okay, so fascinating.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, it could be good, but maybe not.
Yeah.
How much fun?
These are good. They are messy.
Ask my office staff where. Hands are probably. These are probably.
You know, it's just like my wife and I tell each other. Everybody would just do what we say. Everything would work so much smoother. Everything is so much smoother.
A lot of them. We'll figure it out.
That's my office staff. No, they were good.
They're the ones. You might say, okay, but this year. That's right. And that's more to say. That's for this. But other than that.
Instructional growth. Let's just say what's there. I know it's cold in here. Can't figure out how to turn it off.
Where's the?
There's a trash can right up there by the umbrella. Oh, okay. USAA. And he's the response of the created at his community. We have so many bars.
How are you guys? Are you having fun?
I hope I make life easier.
I think I've seen some updates being consumed.
Very good. Great.
So, yes, no,
So please,
Thank you.
we can celebrate your heart.
Well, you know.
That's clever. That's all, yeah, you're good. Good turn.
Yeah, get my exercise. Don't forget the diet. I love it. Something always in there. All right, y'all about ready to come back together?
We're eating.
I'll be sure and call when you have a mouthful. Rachel, hi there. Are you back with us?
I'm back. I know you guys.
Okay, great.
If I can remember, remind everyone to speak up, so Rachel can hear.
Oh, yeah, all right. We'll find you there. Okay, if I can have everybody back up here, that would be great. You can get a cupcake on the way.
Perfect.
And I'll be sure and call on you when your mouth is full. Okay, so I'd like to hear a little bit about your group discussions. We will start with the group over here, whoever wants to speak up from that group. Okay. They're all pretty happy.
Our discussion really, let me give you the end of our discussion, what the conclusion that we came up to.
Okay,
The conclusion that we arrived at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is where we landed, is that we should not be vetting every single component under the OEs. So OE, the instructional OE 12 has 17 components. So what we need is one interpretation from the superintendent in terms of how he's going to meet the top sentence up there, providing equitable, I don't remember what it says now, for instructional services, just one.
okay.
And then,
Can I stop you here?
Yeah,
One thing. All right.
yeah,
So remember that the superintendent gives you 2 things for each OEs. And the way you phrase that sort of put those 2 together. So let me make sure we're understanding this. Frank comes back with you when you first give him your standards, okay? The things he can do and the things he can't do with an interpretation. This is what I think you mean. Okay? He also comes back to you with how he's going to show you compliance on that OE. So there are 2 parts of that, all right? And I think, let me see, it's maybe on a different part, but the book actually has a couple of phrases that it recommends the superintendent use. And the first one for the understanding, the interpretation is the board values, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So you're saying this is what I think this means. And then the second is we're going to show you that by. Okay? So you have those 2 pieces, Kathy. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you said meets blah, blah, blah. And that's a little different than the interpretation. Okay, that's the compliance piece.
right, so the board values, that's the interpretation piece.
Yep,
right?
yep,
And
yep.
then the compliance piece is,
Now we're gonna show you.
how
what
we're
we
gonna
mean.
show you, yeah,
Yep.
that, how it's gonna be measured, or what word did you use? again?
Oh, I forgot exactly what it is. Let me see. I've got it written down somewhere for y'all.
Monitor? No? It's kind of like beginning with the end in mind.
Yeah,
We'll know that we got there, we did this, this is how we'll know what we have, right?
yep.
But I don't,
I'll find the actual wording, but,
because the board on the form, on the cover sheet for that OE says it's in compliance or non-compliant. That's, I know that.
yes,
is on-
yes, that's right.
So,
Yep,
the measure.
Yep.
And then, so we also came to the conclusion then, going back to that piece that, board committee should only do board work,
yep,
that if the superintendent has an issue, he would like some input from the board or some conversation with the board, then he could create a committee of board members with members that he chooses based on the expertise that he thinks that the the issue needs to be talked about.
Right?
And this is not a decision-making committee. This is just a conversation. Let's talk about, let's get some input.
Right.
Throw this, if you want, jump in on that.
Jump right in there.
You have a straw man. The staff has a straw man that they're
Okay,
building something, but they haven't got all the pieces. They haven't got the clothes on the straw man or anything yet.
okay. And they
What do
want
you
your
think?
input.
What do you think? How should we go make sure that the board approves this?
Right? Yeah, I gave you more quotes here. You're talking about one of them, where it talks about legitimate place for committees, but not too much work. If operationally focused committees are needed, this is exactly where you are, their creation should be based on the CEO's initiative, and they should be CEO committees, not board committees, right? So Frank could say, guys, let's use the mask mandate. We love the mask mandate or not mandate or whatever, don't we all? All over the state, all over the world. So, if Frank says, man, I'm just getting overwhelmed with this, I would like y'all's input on this. Would you talk with me about this? Okay? That would be a great way to form a committee, let him know what your constituents think. This is something that your constituents are going to have really strong feelings on. You know that. Y'all need to represent them as well, be able to go back to them and tell them why or why not, okay? So be a perfect time to pull together an ad hoc CEO committee, give him some advice, okay, and then back out. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So that was our discussion. I believe I captured it all.
Correct? Yep, David.
I'm not sure I understand. We're not saying, are we the CEO would appoint board members to a committee, right?
No, not a point.
Because I didn't want to hear that.
No. He can certainly invite them, okay? But the idea is he has an operational issue that he wants some input on, okay? He can't say, you gotta come and you gotta come and you gotta come. But he can say, I really would like some of y'all's input on this. Who's willing to step up? And help? But yeah, he can't force you to do it. Yeah, nope. Okay, what about y'all's group? Jump right in there.
Yeah. Well, some of the agendas, there was stuff like the agenda setting meeting.
Hard to tell.
That's what you're supposed to do. So we spent a lot of time on it.
Yep.
But on other ones, we found that much of what was discussed really was, yeah.
Okay, can you give us an example?
In our technology meeting, we went over the wide area network layouts, data storage, replication,
Okay.
structure, plan.
All right.
Now, that's in the OE. Apparently. So,
Okay, all right,
but that we shouldn't be discussing. I mean,
okay,
my group really shouldn't be too concerned about the layout of the wide area network.
well, and let's say, as your, let's see if this is the one, nope, you're gonna have another one in a minute, it talks about the fact, and I love this quote because it's so true, I'm just going to read it to you, it's off your next group activity, I'll just reinforce it by reading it to you beforehand, okay? The issues on which boards spend most of their time, the matters that dominate their meetings, and the topics they dwell on the most, reflect the things they believe to be most important. Right? Far too often, this is the authors of this book's opinion, those things are operational in nature as opposed to outcome focused. Here's the paragraph that I like. To be fair, those outcome matters are much more familiar to most board members than outcome issues are. We've all done things. They are much more easily discussed than whether customers and owners are getting from their organization the benefits they expect and need. Board members tend to understand, or think they do, facilities, personnel, budgets, balance sheets, based on their own professions or interests. For school boards, discussing whether all students are achieving at the levels they should is a very different chapter. So, we all want to do the things we're comfortable doing. Ingrid?
So this is an interesting thing for me because, and this came up a little bit. I was trying to pull up our agenda because what we wanted to talk about was the OE, right? This was our first technology committee meeting and we wanted to look at what was in the OE to possibly structure our ongoing conversations in the tech. It's a new committee.
Okay,
This is what Mark Shohan brought to us, right?
Okay.
So this is not what we wanted to spend time on per
Okay.
se. So that's number one. Number two, sometimes, and this goes back to my earlier comment, I think that they bring everything in the kitchen sink so that they don't get, well, why didn't we know about this? And they don't get accused of not being forthright. So what I feel like with Mr. Shohan, and I think Mr. Schoeninger is the chair of the technology committee, she's trying to feel each other out, right?
sure,
Like,
sure.
what do you want? And we're not even
Yeah.
sure yet.
What are you looking for?
But I do think in this instance, yeah, I don't have particular interest in the wide area network layout,
Right,
but that's what they brought to us.
right,
And what we were talking about in our group was, we had to review the discipline matrix because the state had changed it. And that wasn't something that we were like, boy, can you show us?
But please, show us the matrix, yeah.
So there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff that staff brings to us that we're not asking for that is potentially weedy. And I do think some of it is protective for the staff. They're like, we just need to bring everything we've got on this topic. So.
Okay, so yeah, hang on a second. Let's talk about that for just a second, and then I promise I'll get you guys. So staff are in an interesting position, okay? I mean, y'all are quote overseeing their work, but not overseeing their work. Okay? You're supposed to keep a distance. Frank is supposed to be the one that's overseeing their work, right? But they still have to present. And I talked with some of you in your interviews. You brought up things that you thought could make that go more smoothly. Things like executive summaries. I'm not going to read something. If you bring me something that's 7 pages long, I'm not reading. Bring me a bulleted 1 page. That'll make me happy. That also forces them to figure out what's important. The other piece is, you have to find that balance. And we've all got to just really give each other a lot of grace during this first time through this work. Y'all are setting OEs and results and all that stuff, really still for the first time. I mean, you did it before COVID, and then COVID came along, and heaven help us all, we all had to just kind of go stop and redo some things. So once you get all that set, really set, once you get all the superintendent's interpretations and all the compliance stuff, you don't ever have to do it all again. You'll tweak it, you'll look at it, you'll say, oh, given this change, we probably need to do a little stuff here. But you don't ever have to do all of this again. So just remember that you're in the hardest part of this work, and remind staff that they're in the hardest part of this work. It won't ever be quite this hard again. You need to stay on top of it, but it's never starting from scratch. Okay, so just everybody give everybody a little grace. We're all figuring out the lines. How much do you want to know? How much don't you want to know? I did, Ingrid had time with staff. And I would tell you that they would love not to bring you so much stuff, but they are concerned that if they don't, you're going to ask questions that they can't, or they won't have the information right there to answer.
But the point I'm making is, I think sometimes staff gets in the weeds with us
Right.
because they think we want to.
And drag you into the weeds with them so that they can show you what they're doing.
Yeah, they're like, well, they're going to be in the weeds, so we might as well
Right.
just.
Yeah,
Jump in.
yeah,
but
jump
I
in
mean-
there with them, right?
From our conversation, like using this as an example, I don't think we were asking for as the level of detail they provide. I found it interesting, and I wasn't going to be like.
We don't want to hear you.
Unnecessary.
Right.
So, I often use this example because it's sort of the best way I can think of to illustrate it in terms of questions, right? So I don't know if you saw Holy Grail, right? There's a part in that movie where the guy who's guarding the bridge says, You gotta ask you 3
Speak
questions.
up so Amy can-
Pass,
I'm so
right?
grateful
I'm not
for
sure.
this.
I want Anyway, he says, I'm gonna ask you 3 questions. You gotta answer them right if you want to pass, right? Or you go into the
Right.
board to determine.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So the question comes up, the first question is, what's your favorite color, what's whatever. But then you get to a question where it's, what's the airspeed velocity of an African swallow, right?
oh, yeah,
Who knows that, right?
Right,
You know,
right.
I can get it, I gotta go
Yeah.
look it up, I gotta dig it up.
Right.
But who knows, right? And I think that's part of the fear
yeah,
that you're getting.
yeah, exactly. Well, and I think too, y'all are finding the place where you need to operate. You're still figuring that out, all right? They're still figuring that out too. And I think, they worry that they're not going to give you something you want. And so I think, one of the things that I've told them is in a committee meeting or anywhere, on the board meeting, anywhere else, if you say, I want this, their response to you should always be, and you may not like this, but it should always be, I'll let Frank know that you asked for that.
Yeah.
And then Frank decides whether you get it, okay? Because it really is not up to you to deal with staff members. You deal with Frank. And one point of contact, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But, Frank is your link. Now, that doesn't mean you can't talk to staff. I mean, obviously, you can speak to staff, whatever. But if you want something, okay, if you need a copy of something or want to see how many of this you've got or how those people have been hired or whatever it is, Frank's your man, okay? You can ask a staff member, their response to you should be, I'm writing that down, I'm going to take that request to Frank. And then Frank will get it, okay? It may be, Frank has to keep y'all happy, I get that. But Frank may come to you and say, and I hope he'll get to the place he feels comfortable doing this, it's really kind of down there in the weeds. Are you sure that that's something you really need? I don't mind providing it. It's not secret. We're not trying to hide anything here. But, that's kind of staff. At some point, you may need to say that. Yep.
And, Peggy, I've been in this district for like 21 years, intimately involved as a teacher and so on, and now as a school board member. And I think what transpired is that over years, there was this distrust that developed. And I know that when I joined the board and I was looking at my role models on the board, it was a level of minutia. And we were coming through a very tumultuous time with, when Dr. Moss was leaving, Dr. Burke was an interim, and there was a lot of distrust for some of the work that was being done. Sure. And it takes time
It does.
for that trust to feel felt that there's a team in place, that everybody's pulling their weight, and we don't necessarily have to know the minutia. Because the board was blindsided. I mean, I wasn't on it, but Tina, is this not true?
Yeah.
Earl, it was blindsided, and constituents were like, how come you don't know about that? How come you don't know about that?
Right.
Well, I can speak only for myself, that since Frank has been here, I've told him several times, I come back as a teacher under his leadership.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's taking time. And some of these old habits are hard to break, where you feel like you need to know
Everything.
Yeah. And it's going to take a matter of trust for every department head. I mean,
Yep. And Tricia, that's a great point. And, I think one of the things that we have to figure out how to do, and it's hard, I think it's one of your hardest roles as a board member, is be a really good liaison and conduit between the district and your constituents. That is one of your primary roles. And figuring out how to do that well is very difficult. And depending on your constituents, can be more or less difficult. But, I think what you need to always keep in mind is, they have voted their trust in you. And they want you to keep the ship on track, okay? And going in the right direction. And that we're back at that mission thing. Remember that what your mission is, what your vision is, what your goals are. Y'all have got to make sure that the ship keeps heading toward those. Okay? The little bitty operational stuff, unfortunately, can sometimes, raise its ugly head. And, the public hears about something. Hey, why'd you let it happen? I heard this was going on in the school district. Well, again, I don't need to commute it, but, the board member's role is to reassure the public. We got it. We're working with the superintendent. We're working through the issue. We got it. It's not to, dive down into all the weeds and try to do the work. It's a hard line, but you're right. There's history and you've got to get through that. And none of us can ignore that. Yep.
I also think it's the board's role to cheerlead. I think it's the board's role to go to our schools in our district. We see good things. We praise right then and there. We recognize these people that are often ignored. We're talking to office staff, we're talking to janitors, we're talking to bus drivers, we're talking to those folks. It means a lot to them. A board member comes, some smile, shake their hands, they do a great job. Now, of course, when you go, you can see some things that some disconcerting.
And what
But
are you
you
gonna
never
do?
say that to them.
What are you going to do about
That
it?
goes
Yep,
to, that
right
goes
here.
to Frank.
Right here. This man has big shoulders.
And then once it's on Frank's, I don't expect Frank to come back to me and say, well, I took care of it. No.
Right.
I'm telling you what I saw at one particular time. You're gonna see different things from different
Right.
people.
Right.
And you may say, well, he just saw.
It was a bad
day.
day or whatever.
And
Right,
that's-
right.
And that's fine. But
Right.
you can't go back and say, listen, I want to have feedback on what I saw. Or
Right.
when a constituent calls and you say, I hear you. Go to the principal,
I'll convey your concern.
go to
Yep.
ISD.
Yep.
Then go to Frank. If you're not satisfied, come to me.
Yep.
And I will, and the only thing I can do is bring it to the full board. I'm gonna make sure the constituents. I gotta have 6 other people agree with me if I want to change something that I see down.
Yep. And I think one of the things that you all need to think about in your, I'm sorry, Rachel, I'll be there in just a second. Thank you. Is that you're right. When you see something good, you need to praise it. And you also need to tell Frank those. He'd like to hear that occasionally too. When you see something bad, this is your man. You've got to go to him and say, oh, man, you know what I saw? And, he's got to look into that. Now, and again, it's about trust. And Tricia, you brought up the word. You've got to trust that he's going to deal with it. Okay? Now, if I were Frank, I would probably get back with you in some way, shape, or form. I don't have to. But I'd probably say, if nothing else, I went and I've dealt with that situation. He doesn't have to say anymore. It may be a personnel thing, it may be whatever, but I've dealt with it. Okay. It's not up to you to deal with it. Number one, obviously. It is up to Frank to deal with it. That's his job. That's what you're paying him to do. And if he doesn't, then you do something about it at that level. But you don't do something about it. Okay, good point. Okay. Yes, Rachel.
Thank you, ma'am. I was just going to add something that I heard recently in a session as I was on a work trip, and it was someone who was talking about and someone that also does board governance work, and he was saying, and one of the things that we are tasked with is, representing our constituents in what we do, and sometimes I think that's why we can get into the weeds at times, because constituents will come to us with a question about something very specific. And I found something really helpful. And he said that as board members, we should represent values and not issues. And what he meant by that was that if we as board members press our constituents on an issue that they come to us with, we'll reach down to whatever the core value is And that's where, you know, the compromise and agreement can come. So they might not necessarily agree with what the action is that is done on that issue, but they understand that there is a common core value there that everybody is working towards, and that kind of helps to alleviate that mistrust and also to keep constituents aware that us as board members do align with them and their value systems. So I just wanted to offer that as something, you know.
That's a great point, Rachel. And I think, you know, the whole issue of knowing what your values are, knowing that you're not all ever going to agree on everything. You know, you're just not. And, you know, your constituents may want you to do something that you don't even agree with. You know, and you have to have your core values and the board's core values, which y'all have articulated through your OEs, by the way, or should have done through your OEs, by the way, or working on doing your OEs. Now, did you?
I was going to make a statement.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you're finished.
Stay away.
I don't. That's why I don't entirely agree with the board member visiting a school and responding in a positive or negative sense of what they saw, what that person saw at the school. But for a number of reasons, but the basic reason is there is a general core value that the board represents, and what that person saw might be specific and temporary and for the time, but if there is some concern, then, you know, Frank, I visited that school, and you ought to go out there sometimes.
Exactly.
Telling me what you saw specifically, and people on the ground there, they're intimidated by that. They're intimidated by the fact that a board member is coming in and troubleshooting and then taking it back to Frank, who has a hammer.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line there, Mel, and I think you're absolutely right. I think if you go into schools as just, you know, an ambassador, if you will,
Yes,
from the board.
ambassador,
An
right.
ambassador to look at what's going on, and you don't comment on it, you just look and say, you know, it's good to be here, and appreciate the job you do,
Right.
and, you know, off you go.
Say thank you, and
Exactly.
everybody's doing great.
Exactly.
Frank,
And then you go
I
talk to
visited.
Frank, okay?
Can you visit?
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
my
No, you're
perception
right.
of what, you know.
Well, and that's the other thing, as an individual, and I say this here,
Gamble again.
we were gonna get to this in a bit, but we'll get to it now. As an individual, you have no power. None, zero, okay? As a member of this body, you do. So the body has the say and vote and the power, the individuals don't. So you're right. I mean, you can go in as an ambassador from the board and talk to Frank about what you see or what you don't see. But, you know, as an individual, you don't have any power to do it. All right, on we go. So can we put our thing back up here? Oh, I'm sorry. William, did you have your hand up?
No, I don't, but actually, I will just comment on what Mr. Campbell just said.
Sure.
You know, I find that interesting, but due to the fact that, what about when you have an administrator who asks you, well, before you leave, or before you leave, hey, what did you share with my mother that do you have any questions about? Or they not, what do you have? What do you do when you have that? I mean, because that does happen. Right. So let's not be naive. Let's not be naive about it, and let's just not play offense for the administrators and say that they are intimidated, because I don't believe that they are intimidated. So I just want to get that.
I hear that. Yeah, I hear that, and they do. You know, they want. What'd you see? Did you see something like? You know,
Right.
I think.
So you can't use it with the convenience, in other words.
I think a good answer though to that is not, well, you know, that teacher had 4 kids asleep in her classroom. I mean, yeah, no, I didn't want to say that, okay? I think a general answer about, you know, I'm always amazed at what y'all do. I appreciate the work that you do. I mean, some general answer is great. But getting into specifics with the principal, take them to Frank.
Right, I agree, but my point is, And that's twofold, because,
Yeah.
there, what you're doing is you're opening up the door for a conversation, but then you may not want to accept the answer, so then now it can't be good for you when it works, when it's all good conversation, when it's all good, but then when it's bad, then you twist.
Right, no, I understand, it's not, and I'm not saying you don't say anything.
Oh, no, I just want to put it out, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I got you, and they are gonna ask you, because they want to know, you were in my building? Yeah, you were in my building, would you, they're gonna ask, yeah, right?
So I think one of the things too, though, that's important to just be conscious of is that when you walk into a building and you're a board member and even if they ask you a question, well, what did you think, right? And you say, well, I would do this or I would do that. Guess what? They're gonna go do it.
They think they have to do it, that's right, yep,
Right? But it may not fall in line with whatever our overall strategy is.
exactly,
Right?
you don't
And then there
give,
comes a conflict that then they get caught in, right?
yeah, you don't ever want to give specifics, never, 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 never.
Yeah.
It's
So
just not,
that's
it's
the,
not up to you. Yep, you're not a teacher, you're not a principal, you're a board member.
For me, I think that sometimes staff, some of us confuse the staff.
Let's talk about it.
When a staff in committee meeting, I ask you, what do you want me to do? What answer, direction should I go? Most of us been on this board long enough to know how this district operates. Especially HR. So I don't see why the questions you ask each time you have a committee meeting. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
The director of that office know exactly what they do, how they're supposed to do it.
Well, and it's not up to y'all to tell them how to do it.
That's right, you know? Yeah. And when you go to a school, I always call the school with white belt. And I speak to principals, I'm coming. I'm not coming there to look for dirt. I'm coming there to visit the school. You know? And find out if they have any concerns.
Yep.
And if they have concerns, I bring it back here.
Yep. Represent your constituents.
Thank you.
All right, yep, Nick.
I visit schools in my district in the fall and in the spring. I ask principal, when's a good time for me to come and see you? Talk about whatever you want to talk, go walk with you. You want to show me something? I'll walk with you. And then after I've visited all the schools, I sit down with Frank and say, this is what I saw. But also, I consider that the schools in my district, I'm supposed to champion them to the rest of the board. And when a subject comes up to the board about traffic in front of Robert Smalls, I can say something about it.
Right.
And I hope the board would say, okay, he's down there seeing
He
it.
knows about that, right?
For you all have schools, and if you tell me that there's the bus schedules between May River and London High School are all goofed up, well, what's your solution? And I'm supporting whatever you want to do, because you're the person on the ground. That's what being a representative for your district is about.
Right, and I think you're making a great distinction. You represent them, you don't tell them what to do, okay? Or make comments. You're absolutely right. I mean, if you go into a place, as Frank has pointed out, y'all are big people. And if you go in and you say just sort of offhandedly something, they're like, oh, I gotta go right there, right there. Can you over there? Yeah. I mean, you got to remember, you're important, and they love to see you and they love your support, but that's really all you do. Yep.
Yeah, and I would just add this, because I was a principal. Right? So when you visit a school and you ask a question such as, what do you need? What can I do for you? Okay. That's an open invitation.
That's right. Here's the list.
Right? Come on now. Let's keep it real, right? It is, right? So when I get sometimes a call from a constituent, from a parent, or from whatever, right? One of my first questions is, have you talked to your principal?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Maybe they have, maybe they haven't.
Yep.
But try to figure out where they are.
Yep.
Right, in that situation, because most of the time, those things get resolved
Yep. At a lower level.
at that level, right? That's where it's typically managed and handled, and you get resolution, you know? So I just encourage you, as you visit, to be prepared that if that's the question you ask,
Yeah.
be ready,
Yeah.
right? But I would follow up with a question around, have you spoken to your executive director? Or have you spoken to the superintendent?
Yeah.
Whatever.
And that wish list, may or may not fit in with the, project the resources and the what plans for the school. So you just have to be careful with that. All right. We've talked about this. I don't want to give a lot of time, but remember this whole one point of contact issue. If you ask staff for something, they really should say, I'll share it with Frank and we'll get back with you. Yes, Steve.
Got a question for you, Dr. R.
Yeah.
You adjust the temperature in this room. It's freezing over here.
Oh, come on over.
This is how we
We
short
live in
meetings.
Florida over here. Are you guys hot over there? No, yeah, it's freezing over here.
Guys. Hi, Alaska.
I know.
It's on your
Why?
Giving the superintendent direction.
It's
What is your interpretation of that?
Halloween training school. Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on here. A lot of the interviews talked about results, and David has brought that up again. Remember that your main job is to make sure that the ship is going in the right direction and making the progress that it needs to make. Okay. So again, some quotes here. It's not unusual to find that agendas consist entirely of matters related to organizational processes and operational functions. Little or no time is scheduled to deliberate whether the organization is succeeding in achieving its mission. Right? That's the purpose of the board. You need to figure out if you're making progress, adequate progress towards your outcomes. Okay? Dominant concern should be whether you're making progress. Board owns the organization's vision, mission, we talked about this a minute ago, and goals, which are the results, while the staff owns the strategies and actions. All right? Okay, look at the next one. We're going to talk about operational expectations, but the big thing I want you to remember, and I'm going to bring you some group thing again. The big thing I want you to remember, and I was going to make you some little buttons that said how in the middle and were the prohibited signs, how, not yours.
Yeah.
What is yours? How is not yours? Okay. How is friend? Okay. So we're going to talk about results, and I know some of you have your notebooks, some of you don't. I put mine back there, so there's one back here if you want it. But I want to talk about your results. And I want to talk about, I know that the past 2 years have just been crazy in terms of data. You just don't have much. But we're getting back to a place that we do. And it may be that y'all want to think about, I know in some of your interviews, you talked about the fact that there's so much more going on now than just achievement, academic achievement. There's all of the mental health stuff. There's all the social emotional stuff. I mean, there's a lot going on. So it may be that you want some results around some things that aren't just those test numbers. Okay, that's up to you. But clearly the district is being asked to do things besides just content knowledge. Okay. If you think about the profile of a South Carolina graduate, I think y'all have all seen that. I will just give you a little background. I was on the group that helped develop that. That came out of the Superintendent's Association and a group of business people. And my day job is actually working with all those business people. And if you look at that profile, 2/3 of it has nothing to do with content knowledge. Okay? Nothing to do with content knowledge. It's life skills and characteristics. Okay? And those are things like problem solving, critical thinking, perseverance, work ethic, all that stuff. We did a study after it had been out there about a year. We talked with teachers and principals and folks on the ground and said, how's it going with this? And they said, well, we really like it, but we don't think parents want us messing around with some of this stuff. The integrity, they do that at home. Work ethic, they do that at home. I said, okay, well, we're going to do a survey. And so we hired a firm out of New York to come in and do a poll, parent poll throughout South Carolina. And we had lots and lots of questions, but one of them dealt with that issue. And 98.8% of parents across South Carolina said that teaching those life skills and characteristics was a joint responsibility between the school and the family. Right? So we went back to the educators and said, you got permission, go for it. We test a lot of things. I mean, I work for Transform SC, and we look at a lot of those pieces because we are a business-led nonprofit. And they care about those things, teamwork, and all those pieces. It doesn't help you to get somebody that knows math if they can't get along with anybody. Okay? So our issue was, our school's issue was, we think these things are important too, but nobody looks at whether we make progress on this stuff. All they care about is that state test data or the national test data, whatever, right? We wish y'all would put some effort into figuring out how to show progress on these other things as well. So we are working. But I say all that just to say to you, when you're thinking about your results, I know you have a result around teacher recruitment. I know you have, several other things. It might be worth considering some results that you could think about the other pieces of Frank's job. The schools are having to do a lot right now. And I know that the staff talked about that when we talked as well. So you might just consider, right? All right, so I need you, yes, ma'am.
I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
This is the metric section.
Yes.
All the things that you talked about are all great things.
Yep.
What are the metrics?
Yep, exactly. And you have to think about ways to do that. I'll tell you a couple that have been used around the state. There's a type of instruction called EL, stands for expeditionary learning. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but some of our schools in South Carolina use it. I'm not advocating, I'm just saying it's out there. In order to stay an EL school, you have to submit a portfolio every year, right? And in those portfolios, you have to have things that show advances in your students' communication skills, advances in their perseverance, advances in their time management. And so they've had to figure out ways. Now, when they stand up in a Supreme Court challenge on, I'm going to kick this kid out of high school because he isn't persevering enough. No, they would. But they're not being used for that sort of thing. They're used to give kids feedback on how they're doing. Okay. I'll give you an example. Lexington Wood, as an example, actually sends home a report card. And again, I'm not advocating this, I'm just giving you an example. Sends home a report card that has, the normal stuff, but it also has a work ethic piece. It also has a time management piece. It also has a teamwork piece, right? And they were, but someone is pretty researchy. And so they've done a lot of work around those pieces. And they went out and got parent support. They did the right thing. They didn't just send it home and everyone thought, well, I don't understand. So they did it right. But there are ways, David, to really look at that. Depending on what you want to look at for this communication piece, they actually bring in a panel of community experts. And every senior has to make 3 presentations throughout the year to this, a different panel of community people. And they are, quote, graded by the community people on how well their idea was communicated. I mean, there are ways to do it. It's not, valid, reliable. I mean, I'm a measurement person. You probably couldn't get it past Stanford's, metrics and psychometricians, but it is good information. And nobody's being held back by it. Nobody's being stigmatized by it. It's just saying, here's the progress you're making on this.
I'm just leery of us getting into the thing where we have high graduation rate and low test scores.
Right, I hear you.
You know,
Well, graduation
It's
rate is something
it's Johnny
completely
showing
different. Yep,
perseverance. Yeah.
I hear you. Yes, right,
He is, but then
Right.
you heard not.
right, exactly. Okay. Yep, yeah.
My question is, who owns it? How then, who'd own that? Frank or us? And, where do we chop the
I think y'all decide what your big parameters are, okay? And one of the things that I think you said is that you want to close the sheet, right? That's one of your big pieces, all right? You can have big pieces. We want to graduate a well-rounded student. I mean, whatever it is you want to say there, that could include career and technology stuff. That could, whatever it is, I'm just saying that don't just settle for the easy things. Yep.
I think we're somewhat on that path. I don't know about scoring it, putting a number to it, but Frank has been directed to have a profile of the Beaufort County School District graduate, which will include a lot of those things that you just mentioned.
Right.
And if we could just bring back the kindergarten report cards.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
And apply that to high school, we have a lot of that, everything you need to learn in kindergarten, assessed. And when things are assessed, kids pay attention to it. When they're
And
graded,
so do
when they're-
teachers and principals and superintendents,
Yep.
we all look
Yep.
at what's assessed. All right, so I'd like for you to get in groups. I would like you in groups of this time, please. And I'm going to give you these. You have more quotes. Except you do. So Rachel, we are on small group 2 results.
No, really. The results are in
You move around, right?
I have copies of the results in folder.
So we can generate a discussion. I'll work with Dr. R. The birthday guy. The chair.
It's just one.
Yeah, Robert. You're sitting.
Right.
Yeah.
William and Rachel or.
Whatever you want to do. But that's smart.
What kind of food you have?
2. Maybe you want
Yeah,
to.
she was.
I'm sorry.
I was telling them.
Well, every group has to have.
Well,
Whenever you do this, it's still
So
on.
Rachel-
You don't have any number one.
Rachel's still on?
Rachel, are you there? Yeah, sorry. Multiple people are.
Sad, I can't read.
Rachel's on it.
Yeah,
She's on there. Rachel says she's on. So.
Okay, all right, good, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm here. It's just hard sometimes when there's multiple people talking for me to hear y'all.
He was a smart. Yeah, specific, measurable, achievable.
Is there an acronym a colonel of the military is not familiar with?
You probably.
We only have 4 letters.
Tokika?
We have a limit on how long the acronym can be.
Rachel,
What you.
how would you like to participate? You want to join a group?
Persistence. Right.
I was gonna listen to the reports because I think you guys would have to hear me on the one little group, so I don't know how it would
I'll
work.
be glad to try to work you into a group if you want to do that, but if you want to hear the reports, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll listen to the reports.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I'll listen to data.
I look at this.
Hey, we're trying to join our groups. Stay in your group.
Stay in your own lane.
He's on my team.
Watch your lane.
Get out of the way. Okay.
And we're supposed to discuss our results.
That's what.
I have to say. Results are.
Well, I have to try to watch it. So I gotta be careful. We took every statistic that was available.
So there's three main categories. Student, which is, it can be defined in multiple ways. Because all they have is specific.
So y'all remember the SMART things, right? You go over those. Go to the next, go to that, down several. We'll go back. Yeah, go back. Yep. Okay, they're on the floor. They're on the floor. You need them? SMART things.
You're in your folder.
You're in their folder. They're in your folder. It says culture science.
That's not a result.
And that's not the result per se. I don't think that's that better. Yeah.
And I just added that. Which goes up. I know that you're trying great a little bit. I know that's teachers don't like this.
You say these kids will never be.
I think it would be nice. And very well. When 1 year is not like, to your point, it's really big. Our principal said that's just gonna be. And then she just. So it's.
Most of them.
You know, they're moving away. From meetings no longer. Like, everything.
But it just, right, it just.
Does I feel like.
Probably already. I had to go side.
Well, this is what I mean, but the other side is like.
Manage what you manage.
Because you gotta take those measurements and stick them out. That's right.
They're gonna be subjective now. Their biases, stupid bias. There was some bias.
Internal bias, external bias, validation bias.
We can come up with measures. That's not really I'm more of a broker than a results
So for this. Powerful. So when you join Howard. So like. I get a notification, it's great. I get a notification that she has great. So I certainly, now, we're pretty much money on it, it's our learning management system, it's not just. I was curious. If you have to sign up, it's a technical thing. Give you a password. Is there a?
Oh, that's what you can't do. They're in there, I'll put them in. Oh, you haven't done Word document.
But if you send them to me, I'll.
Trying to find a point.
They were telling them how to.
No, I just want to know if we're. So how to like that.
I will tell them how to.
This is really good.
I agree with you. So the legal side of that's.
Problem is, a student here.
I sent it to you already. She sent it to
Yes.
And these are what you say. We do all those other things.
This is across the school district. That's not, it's not just in your.
Oh.
I just sat here talking.
This is.
Yeah, I was just like, one of our goals would be broadband, right? We know every kid has, but it would be nothing. Yeah. I just want you to know what.
How you doing?
Yeah. Well, then,
Just having a mouse contagion and some of the small things that you're discussing.
It's right there. Turn to your left.
Well, I said mistakes. I said mistakes without you are.
Yeah. Slow the fan down. And the fan is still down, but the temperature went down to 72 right now.
Okay, got one person. This is your team, so they all.
Yeah.
I think it's more like.
I think that's fine.
Okay. And I'll see. I think
We go to. I coach them.
Yeah.
Oh, the time will rise. Say she.
There's a line there. It's very hard to sit. Anyway. That's everything.
I read
Not your style.
What they get call this stuff, not the teams.
So that's what we did. Constantly training. Seizing some of those elements of teaching. Better math. Classroom management. Motivate kids.
You know, it's all, it's controls and it's necessary to develop.
That is.
He knows, right?
Teach you how you learn.
And they That's teacher. And so that's teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
I'll have an answer for you.
a big problem. It's not a big news.
Yeah, they're very, very manageable and attainable.
Hammer away.
Well, or all of them. You know, you may need additional. Or not.
I would agree with 1 and 2. The third bullet, I would say, yeah.
I agree.
Be good.
Are y'all done? Y'all done?
That's how we have to say.
Y'all done? Right? Tricia, y'all
Then
done?
we went to travel. I didn't specifically.
So,
Okay, I think we're ready to come back together.
I guess I'll see your motion.
She's not. Just. It's kind of a pleasure.
Okay. I know Dick and Earl were talking about me, but they just said she's perfect. Yeah. Sure, that's for conversation. Just kidding. Okay, so I want to tell you, I intentionally skipped over OEs to go to results because people kind of get confused. I want to talk about this and then we're going to circle back and talk about OEs a little bit more. Okay, so, all right. Let's hear from a group. Down at the bottom, you had 4 bullets. Okay, let's hear what you thought about those bullets.
We agreed that the results are fit, they do fit SMART criteria.
Okay, well, that thought. Everybody else agree with that?
Yep.
They fit the SMART criteria. Yes, 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 yes.
Team serving did.
Get it?
And I just came up with that.
Yes.
Yes, yes, okay. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so we also, well, thank goodness that my partner here explained this to me, because this was created prior to us coming on board.
So you were not able to articulate easily.
Well, now I can.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, I can articulate this easily. And we were, as we were talking about the numbers, I asked the questions, about the baseline numbers here. We talked about not having the data from
Yeah,
last year due to COVID. And, the question is, when we decide on the numbers for 21, 22, do we need to create a new baseline? Or can we use, to compare, to the two previous years that we do have information? Because we're not gonna have.
yeah, hold that thought for a second. I think that is the universal question globally. Where are kids right now? And we don't know yet. And so your baseline may or may not be appropriate. I think you're gonna have to figure that out once you have some data, okay? Before we leave that bullet, I wanna make sure you understand why I put that bullet in there. When your constituents talk to you, this is the main topic of conversation that you should have with them, okay? Because that's what you're responsible for. You're responsible for moving the ship forward. Okay? And these outcomes are what you've said will move the ship forward. So I want to make sure, number one, that you're all familiar with them. And number two, that they're what you want and that you can explain them well. Because when your constituents come to you and say, oh, I've heard the district's just really going down the tubes, and they're not going to say that because that's not what they feel right now. But if they did, okay, you need to be able to come back with information, not, oh, no, I'm on the board and everything's fine. Right. That's not going to help them. You need to be able to say, we monitor very closely the progress or lack thereof that's being made. And here's what I'm seeing. Okay? They need that information from you. That's your job. So I just wanted to get that bullet in there to make sure you thought about how you convey this information to your constituents. And we're going to talk a little bit later about ways that you may want to communicate. I know you all have your ways of doing that regularly with your constituents, but there's some really good ways to share, information, not just your thoughts, but real information that's come from the district that you want to get out there. Okay, so we'll talk about it. All right, so do y'all agree with this group that you can articulate these and you understand? Nod, yes, no, yes, yes. Okay, good, smiling, all right. All right, bullet 3.
So the results do cover the important areas that we are addressing. They do cover our mission.
Okay.
Since we're moving the ship and we own that mission,
Okay,
it does cover those areas.
and there is that little word all in there. And you felt good that covered all your
I believe so.
areas, all right?
I've just thought of one addition. We didn't talk about this, but based on the presentation that we had, at the academical program, attendance perhaps could be something that we add. I'm just thinking based on that presentation, because we know that kids are in school, they do that. So just thinking.
And you may,
You weren't feeling.
you may.
So this is where I want to highlight the things that we're working on to improve, right? I just don't want to be hit over the head with a hammer. And there's things like sending a kid to school that I can't go pick up and bring, you know what I mean?
So I think you can have a general outcome and have, wording like, and this, I'm just doing off my head, so I don't use this, but, indicators of a healthy district. Okay, and indicators of a healthy district are things like high attendance, high teacher attendance, high student attendance, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't want to look at that in and of itself, okay? That's too granular, but it is an indicator that good things are going on. Teachers and kids want to be in school. Okay, so, all right.
So,
Okay, did anybody, yes, sir.
so your answer to that question was yes?
Theirs was, how about everybody else?
I have a no.
I had a note, I had a
Yeah,
strong
we had that
note.
too.
Okay, we had some no's. Let's talk about that. All right. You talked first, Mel. You brought this up.
And Rachel's
I
here.
just wanted to
Oh,
make sure I
Rachel
was.
said that is okay. I'll be there, Rachel. Okay, why did you reach that?
Because of the other things that we have to address that's not evident is performance. I mean, she mentioned one right there, that's, some culture building things
Okay,
that's needed, that's not measurable always.
okay,
And I think we do it, but it's not measured in the results.
all right. And anytime you say it's not measuring the results, you have to ask yourself, can it be measured? And if not, is there a way for us to look at it without it being,
We had that discussion.
right? All right, Tina,
Well, you already mentioned several in our discussion so far
Okay.
today. You know, like the perseverance, you know, I guess that's probably a good example, or group cooperation, that kind of stuff. And those are harder to measure, I think.
they are,
Sort of checklists,
right,
but attendance is a good example. That would be easier to measure, obviously.
okay,
So, yeah, I think there's other things perhaps that we should add,
okay. You have career ready, right?
right?
Yeah.
Right? College and career ready, you've got that one. Some of those things, I know, you know, when you say college and career ready, you automatically think about the school report card, right? Just the report card has that little measure, you know? But you can broaden what you mean by that. You know, the EOC has certain things that go into that measurement, okay, and those would have to be there. You could have other things that went into that measurement as well, if you chose to. You know, there are ways to use what you have and actually broaden some of that. Okay, David, you got a comment?
Yeah, you really confused me with the indicators,
Okay,
because, I'm focused on results.
yeah, absolutely.
Indicators are not results. And go back to what Kathy was saying. Attendance is smoke. It's not a fire. You follow that to the fire, right? So that's not a result. You don't
Okay.
care about attendance. You've got a kid that doesn't come for 25 days, but they ace everything and they get into Princeton, right? So attendance is not, and that's we get hung. I get hung a lot of times on that. That's a good thing, but is it a result?
Okay. I would say that your teacher attendance is an outcome piece because it's going to contribute to what you're seeing on that page. If you have subs in 90% of your classes, 50% of the time, your results are going to go down. Okay, your outcomes that you already got there are going to go down. So it may be that you want some, I call them benchmarks, informative metrics. Okay, you've got those summative metrics that you have right there. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, all that matters is whether kids are leaving this district ready for the next step, whatever that step is. Okay, are they academically ready? Are they socially ready? Are they career ready? I mean, whatever it is, are they ready? That's your bottom line. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so Dave and I had a discussion about this because I think we're at different ends of the spectrum on this issue. That's why I wanted to talk to him, because I think he's been on the board for a while and has a lot of experience, and I'm, the newbie. But I will say, kind of planting my flag here on this, one of the things I'm interested in as a data science person is, there's all these pressures now for value. How do we determine value? Value-based payment systems for medicine. Well, what does a quality surgery look like, right? And there are things we can do. And I think this sort of bubble-in test with a score, as a parent, I don't even look at my kids' math scores. Now, part of that's because I know that they're good.
They're fine. Yeah.
Maybe I would feel differently if I was worried. I don't think parents care about that so much. I think that is what parents are looking at is what courses can my kid take? Who are they hanging out with? Are they safe? Are the mental health and social emotional stuff? What kind of access do parents have? What kind of parent engagement? these kind of issues. So to me, one of my questions to you when we sat down was, I don't get our results section.
Right.
Like, to me, those are really thin things to focus on. And maybe Frank, those are very measurable and attributable to him. So I don't want to put him in a bind. But I think in 2021, we can.
I mean, I personally have an issue with it in the sense that, and I didn't realize this when I first got here, right?
Yep.
And I signed on to it, right?
Yep.
Because I didn't realize this piece, right?
Yep.
It took me a while to catch on to it, but once I figured it out, I'm like, wow, right? So I'm the only one in the system that is accountable to student achievement. Our teachers are not, our administrators are not, quite frankly, our students really aren't, because you can graduate high school without passing an ELC exam.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So the issue for me is when it sits as 50% of my evaluation and nobody else in the system technically has any accountability around that, right?
Yep.
And so that's where I see a disconnect in that system. Now, we borrowed the evaluation system heavily from a state that does have 40%, at least 40% of the evaluation system in a teacher's evaluation.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
That's a big difference. In
It is.
Florida, where I came from, it was 50%
Yeah.
of the teacher's evaluation, of an administrative evaluation. It's a big difference.
So we can't spend all day today on results.
Yes.
I mean, we could, but we can't. Yeah, Rachel, I'm coming, just one second. But I do want to throw this out there, and I just want y'all to think about it, and we can have another discussion down the road if you want to on this. There is a whole movement at the national level called skills, not diplomas. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the idea is that many businesses right now have stopped looking at diplomas or for diplomas and are looking for particular skills, all right? AT&T is a perfect example. AT&T has stopped asking for a high school diploma for anything except its engineering jobs. Obviously, then it needs a high school diploma and a college diploma, right? But all the other things, their call centers, their linemen, everybody else, even middle managers in AT&T don't have to have a high school diploma. And the reason is they found it didn't differentiate between good employees and bad employees and couldn't legally defend it. So they said, we can't use that as a criteria.
And to piggyback off that, I mean, I was just telling Frank, in technology, they're going away from degrees. They're going into certificate programs.
Exactly, and that's skill based. And it's skill based.
Why spend $200,000 on a college
So
diploma?
there are a bunch of things out there that are beginning to try to measure skills, all right? There's something called core score that we have in South Carolina now. You can go take a core score test, and it supposedly measures things like perseverance and blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can take your little core score sheet, okay, to an employer, and you can say, I don't have a high school diploma, but I can do these things, and here's my proof. Okay, and there are lots of employers that are beginning to say, okay, I'm on down. So I know, I mean, again, it's a huge different discussion. I don't want to necessarily go there today, but I do want you to know that there is a movement that direction. And that these academic pieces, while they're important, may not be everything.
Can I say?
Yep.
So I just want to tell a story because I'm pretty anti-testing. Well, because they're culturally biased. And there was this person on the story worked for fourth grade class in inner city Atlanta. And he said, the kids were doing horribly. And he got in there and he worked with them. And they took their testing, and one of the subjects was weights and measurements. So he spent a ton of time on weights and measurements. One question on the end of the year test, and the question was, which of the following animals weighs 16 ounces? It was like elephant, lion, dog, parakeet. And he goes, every single one of my students got it wrong. He's like, you know why? Because they didn't know what a parakeet was.
Oh, wow.
But there, you think about all those little tiny biases in those tests, and they're not just necessarily racial or culture, they can be language. And we're using that as our core measurement. So anyways, I think
Okay, I'm sorry, Rachel, are you still there? You still remember what your question was?
No, I lowered my hand because I didn't want to get into the weeds with
I'm
anything. But
sorry.
no, it's fine. I did want to make a comment, kind of like to Frank's point about that he's the only one accountable for those metrics or whatnot. I certainly support him in putting anything in place that makes others accountable. So.
Well, I can't because it's a state evaluation system that has to be used. That's my job.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't say can't. I'd say that there's other ideas and policies and things that you could put in place that other districts are doing. And I think that's a discussion for another time. But I'm just saying that there are other ways to make the others accountable, to bring the whole system up, and also so it not to feel like such a weight on just your shoulders. So that was just going to be my comment.
Yeah, one of it is just the furthest away from the classroom.
Right,
where it
right,
happened, right? You
Right,
know,
right.
But yeah.
And
You're the one that can hire and fire and say this is not good. and that's
Right.
good.
Well,
So
and
maybe
when you
it's
look
a
at it,
little
though,
Yeah.
when you look at it, I have done it, right?
Oh, I know.
And when I did, where are we sitting in right now? That's for another day conversation, though.
yeah.
But we've got to.
Yeah, and again, my goal for today was to get y'all to go, maybe we need to do some work around our results. Okay, have you all gone, maybe we need to do some work around our results? All right,
Yeah, I need to follow this.
yeah, we do, we really do.
Yes.
Yeah.
we do. Right.
Okay, number 4, look at that one. That's the question we're gonna ask in the next conversation. It's bullet number 4 on the sheet that you were just working on. It says, how would you recommend improving the result outcome statements or monitoring processes? So again, I love the fact, and understand my PhD is in research and measurement. I am right there with you, David, on the island. I spent a lot of time on validity and reliability and equating studies and blah, blah, blah. So I'm there. But I will say that I think you have to look broadly. And I think you have to think about your goal for every kid. And every kid is not an academic kid. So there are going to be kids that are very, very successful that aren't successful on these measures.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
And so how do you, so the district hasn't failed that child. If that child has gone through CTE or, there are lots of ways that you can focus on a kid. Yeah.
What would a result, because I don't like this is just me, I don't like all the super high hardcore metrics as our results, because I think there should be some more anecdotal or qualitative results and in with the quantitative. What would that look like? Like, what's an example?
Well, you should have seen the way we did the superintendent's evaluation in the past. There was absolutely, David, Earl can say this with me, there was absolutely no framework, structure, anything for the superintendent's evaluation. It was purely objective. Every board member
That's not okay either.
could just say whatever they wanted, or or they would decide what they felt was important. We had an attorney in the room who tried to listen to what the input was, and then tried to write a summary without identifying, like he might say, the attorney might say, some board members thought the superintendent had good community outreach doing blah, 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 blah. And then others felt, it was very kind of like that. And I remember, so this is with, I probably shouldn't say this since I don't want to reveal anything
Sure.
performance
Right, yeah.
publicly, since this is a
Yeah.
publicly recorded meeting, but each board member could decide what they felt was
That's what I'm
important.
saying. What would be an example? Like, could you have a qualitative, like, we will offer 18 K, like, what is it? Because we will offer some K programs, we will offer, would that, like, as a result, like, how do you, if you're not tying it to a specific SMART metric, can you have a qualitative result?
You can. I mean, and again, that's a discussion for another day.
It's not totally subjective.
I can see you don't want subjectivity, right? You don't want that. You want something that everybody can,
But we don't want to say, you need to, we want to have at least 18 K programs, and he's got 16, and we're like, no, I'm sorry, you got to add.
right, exactly. There are ways that you can write those. I'll be glad to pull some together and send you some
I'd be interested to
examples.
see what
I'll be
that
glad to do that. Again, I'm not advocating the examples I send you, they're just, okay? So I'll be glad to do that. But I think this is an area that y'all need to talk about, okay? Because remember, your job as a board is to make sure the district goes the direction you want it to go. And these results set the direction. Well, I've heard from all of you now, and you know, one thing that keeps coming up is achievement gaps. Okay? So there are what I would call interim measures to close achievement gaps that might very well be part of your outcome pieces. Okay, that aren't all the way to this. This is going to take years, you know, to actually close it. Everybody's moving. You know, it's not like these people at the top stay still and these people can catch up. That's not the way it works. Everybody's moving. So you have to figure out ways to do interim pieces. So we can talk.
I think that's another conversation, because I think that if you're an educator, you may have had a better understanding of the achievement gap situation. If you're not, the understanding is typically at, what do the numbers say? Is it close? It's not close.
Right,
But
right.
there are so many factors that go into the
Yeah.
achievement gap. Like,
Yeah.
for example, poverty plays a significant impact on an achievement
Absolutely.
gap. And yet that's not, that's something that's just a reality.
Right.
Characteristics are a reality of some of that, you know?
Right.
And so that's a bigger discussion, which I think we need a more
Well,
level playing field on that
In
discussion.
5 days, 5 day
that's right.
retreat.
Yeah,
Exactly.
We do.
Exactly.
It's all of us.
Really?
And I do think, as you know, there are places that focus on teaching kids in poverty, and there are strategies that work for that. So, you know, you could, if that was an issue for y'all, you could put some strategies around moving kids that are in poverty in certain directions, okay? I mean, there are ways you can do that. All right, so we're gonna back up for just a second. Would you back up several slides? I can't see. Yeah, go next. Yes,
Can I just?
Yes, I'm sorry, Kathy.
Here just for a minute.
the next.
I think that,
I'm listening.
I definitely think I agree, we need some work results. I think we've got to be very cognizant that our community, our constituents expect results in terms of test scores, because that's the information that they've been fed, that's what they get. And that, so if we add things or, you know, decrease the emphasis on that, we've got to do some education as a public, and we've got to do that, because that's what everybody thinks when they think holding the superintendent accountable is, that's what they think.
Not parents.
Well,
Parents.
and I don't think you can do away with those.
Yeah, a lot of
But-
them do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of our community, but man, you do have to look at the way the world is going, the way people are going. There's many different things involved in this conversation, because where are we going
Exactly.
educationally?
Exactly.
Where we are we going to say where we have been going? And is that bad or is it good compared to where we're going if we follow the trend? You know, a lot of the companies you mentioned, AT&T and others, they're jumping on the bandwagon that the schools are not producing the academics we need, but we need somebody who can come to work.
Right.
And that's what we're focusing on, because that's what we need now. Now, is that what the schools should be, you know, pushing? Less academics, less efficiency? And then we're gonna end up with other people controlling our efficiencies. We're gonna start buying more foreign cars now, because those cars work long, work well. So all of those things is a part of what we really ought to be thinking about as we set a tone for how we're educating and how we're trying to direct Frank. That's, you know, that's part of it, that I'll wrestle with it too, because I know the numbers. I'm a black man, and I know the numbers have always been the thing that we push towards, because the numbers is something you can't discriminate against.
Right.
Now, when you come to the soft skills, we're writing what they want to write in on the soft skills. So I'll be pushing back, but I also know in reality, soft skill counts when you're out there on the job.
Right, right.
So all of those things are part of what we really ought to look at in the conversation. Is definitely leading us into where we need to be thinking, where we need to be going.
Well, and I think,
I was just gonna say that you have to not only look at what is happening in this county, in this state, but the nation. Attitude in this nation is not to educate every child. We know that. And I think that we have to focus on the children here. Because the attitude is that I want what's for me, you know, the hell with somebody else, it could care less. You know? And to me, that's what he is.
yeah, and I think what we're saying, Kathy, is that you don't leave them.
Oh,
You just brought.
Yeah,
But
I don't
you're
object to that
absolutely
at all. I just wanted to bring that point
Yeah.
forward,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
something.
And you're absolutely right. My one hope, and this, I'm going to do a point of personal privilege here. My one hope is that coming out of this crazy last 2 years, we take the opportunity to take advantage of the new reality that we're faced with. And that we don't just jump on board with going back to normal.
Right. Amen.
Normal did not work for a whole lot of kids.
Well, 5% of public school students have disenrolled.
Exactly. And so, you know, I think we have to take advantage of this opportunity that we have right now to rethink a lot of things. And it's not easy. Not saying it's going to be easy, but I think it's an opportunity that we shouldn't pass up. All right, so we're going to go back and look at operational expectations just really quick. If you'll get your little PowerPoint thing out real quick. We are on page 4. I knew I had written this down for you guys, so I was going to show it to you really quick. On the OEs, this is the way that coherent governance gets at operational matters, okay? You're not supposed to do with operational matters, but you care about operational matters. So what do we do about that? So this explains, you have to express it in order to represent the folks you serve, the owners, you know, those are your constituents. OE policies allow the board to either direct that certain conditions exist or that they don't. All right, can you think of one you don't want to exist? Anybody, really quick.
An OE that we don't want.
No, just some condition that you don't want to exist in the school.
Corporal punishment.
Okay, you don't want kids to be spanked, right? You don't want,
Spending more than.
you don't want kids to be hurt. All right, all right, that's one. So that's a negative. What is it? I'm sorry? Oh, it's in your folder.
It's in your folder.
It looks like this. You don't have it? Hang on.
Maybe I took yours.
Let me get another one. We got another one up here somewhere? Here, wait, I've got a folder.
I know, I did too. I picked it up over there.
You can take mine.
Okay, I think, I remember it.
Let me go back, I'll grab it.
We'll get another one. No problem. There's one. All right, we're on page 4. Okay. So you see down that bottom bullet on the top slide, those are the 2 parts. That's what I was trying to remember the wording. So the 2 parts are interpretation and indicators. All right. The first part is the board values ... and what Frank thinks you value. You say, yes, that is right, or no, you missed it. Second part is we'll know we're in compliance when, and that's when he tells you what evidence he's going to give you to know that you got it. All right. So that's that big level. All right. So I think you got that, right? Yeah. Good. All right. And the next one, they express the board's values. You talked about that. It makes specifying the actions and conditions that you expect as well as those you won't tolerate. Talk about that. Now look at the next. CEO's choice of strategies to achieve results is limited by the OE values, but you don't tell him what those strategies are. You tell him the parameters in which they have to work. Does that make sense? All right. Very small number of well-crafted board policies establish the standards of operation that both drive and limit executive and student choices. Typically, a board will have 9 to 12. Hello. Okay, so y'all want, I mean, you know, 17, okay. So they have multiple subparts in there. 18, multiple subparts. So, you know, I want you to look at the OEs and think about that idea of, we used to talk about guardrails. You know, these are your guardrails, right? Anything you do got to be within these parameters, okay? That's where you should do things. All right. And then I have this big slide. What, not how. I may have buttons made and send them to you. Right? What, not how. You can wear them to the board meeting. Anytime you start jumping into how Frank needs to do something or how the staff needs to do something, you can flex the button. All right? All right. Let's move forward to board meetings. All right. As you know, in the interviews, we y'all talked about a couple of things that were problematic. One was this whole idea about length. You know, that board meetings cannot be 6 hours long. That is crazy. Nobody's going to serve on your board if you have a 6-hour board meeting. They're all going to quit. So we need to talk about that. I want to go through a couple of, again, quotes from the book, and then I want to go through a couple other things. Boards can create their own governing structure, but in order to do so, it's necessary to let go of some past experiences and customs. We'll talk about that. Competent people do not always create competent boards. Sometimes competent people create very incompetent boards because they all want to be in charge, right? You are not an individual when you come into that room. You are a member of that board. Now, you represent your constituents, and you have a voice that you need to use, but you need to use it as part of a whole, right? So individuals must at times subordinate their own personal interests, rights, and preferences for the benefit of the board in order to create a coherent governing body that adds value to the organization. Again, that's a quote straight out of the book. Remember that this next piece, the group is more important than the individuals, okay? Now, is that saying you've got to agree with everybody on everything? Absolutely not. You never will. Okay? Is that saying that you make your voice heard, a vote is taken, and then you all move forward together? Yes. May not agree with it. Okay, you didn't vote for it, but the majority did. Get on board. Okay? I think it's really important. You know, I have things that I feel very strongly. And it's really hard if I'm on a board and the other people don't feel strongly about that and they outvote me. You know, my tendency is to want to go out and say, I didn't vote for that. Darn it. Why did they do that? I don't agree with that. No. I am a member of that board, and when that board makes a decision, it's my decision. I didn't have to agree with it, but it's now a board decision, and so I've got to get on board with it. Okay? That's just the way it works. All right, so y'all know about Robert's rules. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Robert's rules. I love this part. I put the this actually came out of Wikipedia. I wanted to see what Wikipedia said about Robert's rules. I'm like, you know, they always have a nice, succinct way of saying something, and they did. Developed to ensure that meetings are fair, efficient, democratic, and orderly. Okay, so they're not to keep anybody from saying something. They're not to do any of that. They are to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly and accomplishes its purpose and doesn't take 6 hours. Right? So you should use Robert's rules if You find yourself wondering where to go from here during the meetings. Your meetings regularly stray from topics of conversation. Even short agendas take hours to accomplish. Your bylaws say that you'll use Robert, which they do. Your meeting minutes are missing important parts of previous meetings. You are looking to build capacity, do it more efficiently. Your board has a member with a strong personality who tends to dominate conversations. All right, if you look at the next slide, this is just some things about Robert's rules. All right, you all have worked under Robert's rules for years, but this is just a reminder. It is a roadmap that gives you a structure. That's the whole idea. It makes following and documenting the meeting a lot easier. Now, your job is not to make it easy on your board secretary, but it's easier for you to follow as well if you stick to Robert's rules and make things move along in an orderly fashion. Everyone has a voice, but not too much of a voice. The process of Robert's rules ensures that everyone has the opportunity to speak, but it can limit the amount of opportunities someone can speak on a topic. Members will learn to be more on point when it's their turn to speak. It can quicken the decision-making process without sacrificing the opportunity to share information, because everybody needs an opportunity to do that, to share. It can help prevent members who are determined to have the last word from repeating the same points over and over. You all know, the person makes a point early on, everybody talks, and right before we close the discussion, everybody says, well, one more thing to say, okay? My husband would probably accuse me of being that person. I always want to have the last word, but there we are. All right. The group is more important than the sum of its parts, and the board is actually more important than its individual members. Given that, I want to give you one more little small group thing, and I want you to talk about this, and then we're going to come back and discuss how we can help with some of the issues that y'all have surfaced about the board meetings. Okay? So I want you to grab use that one because I grab 3 other people. We don't use that anymore. I want you to get with 3 other people, 2 other people, okay, for a group of 3. All right. And I'm going to bring you these real quick. Get some new people. Help me with some new people. There was like here.
I'll do you guys.
That's right.
Oh, you're coming. Oh, you're coming. Okay.
Yep, y'all don't need to stay here. You can get up. Go over there. Y'all separate. Yep. This 3 is not over there. Y'all somebody go over there. All right. I don't get it. I'm coming. We see how Rachel wants to.
Rachel,
Yes, ma'am.
you want to participate or are you just listening?
I'm listening in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Occasionally.
She just want to listen in.
Board meetings. I hear this. And trying to why can't we say in paragraph what clause it does say about the do? Report on what's been done. They say we have yellow concerns in the following areas. We have a red. We're going to talk about it.
It's not as easy as just go. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. So you're living with that.
Absolutely.
Posturing and motion.
Yeah.
Yes.
No? Yeah, we're done here.
Meetings are running. Please discuss the vote. Yeah.
Yeah, one way you can do it is have.
Right. Okay, so. Solutions for the.
3 minutes. Your 3 minutes are up. Somebody can. Give their minutes. But everybody gets 3 minutes. That's it.
Yeah, that was hard. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my God. Right. So, you know, you don't have to. Say.
We're gonna stop doing it. We're gonna stop doing it. Even though he's got his microphone.
That's funny, I was. I said, no, let's talk about it, you have to take it off.
I really think the OE is still into the you can put it to us. Everybody can go back to house. I agree. The good thing is it's easier to tell them. You ever had the editor? I don't think we have to stand on it. If there's an issue, absolutely.
Hello. Do you need one of us?
It's not good.
Uh-oh.
It's not good if he needs to. Make sure you work.
Then we just got. Yeah, he's got. Cheers.
We're having third operations training this month on Friday. Last week and 2 weeks. Because we had 5 weeks from the fixed operations and operations. Let me ask you about resources and services.
Let me ask you, I've never been on a board.
Departments come to operations. Okay. Always. Construction updates. I swear it's.
Ruling.
Well, and this is.
And you make an opinion and the chair makes a rule.
Because I really said.
I've never.
So,
They did.
we have got a concern about this. One of the agenda items was some ideas for retention. Track and retain.
So they keep track.
Right.
arbitrary thing.
But I'm thinking about what you said.
Dr. White.
I'm afraid we're gonna get into college. Instead of their doctor. So just afraid that HR and instructional.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So anybody be asked for this information? Yeah.
A lot of times you already asked. Right. For example, Kathy wrote my. That should never happen.
Right.
That-
I mean,
We
that's what
don't
it's.
trust it, so now we're gonna.
I feel and all
Every
that.
That staff. They come in. I believe they should be reversed. That's one of the things I had in discussion with Bert and Frank. This organization needs to change. This organization needs to have. We're going to staff together for the community. Let's go over what you're gonna say. And he said, "Oh, no." Just went down. So just check your figures. Before you come in. Is that-
Have a discussion about what can be done to change it. That's not our discussion.
That happens. It will go on and on. Yeah.
But that's an only.
This was kind of a separate
It's a
conversation.
subsection.
Just to. We need to.
Yeah, but you haven't seen it first.
Crazy. And so then we say the phrase, yeah.
Well,
And we know the rest of the nation does too.
but you know, academics.
All right.
Not been politicized. I think it's a PhD in education. Not as much.
Yes.
And they have just a great manager and the organization. Focus on that. So that's the problem. And so it's not. When we look at the young problems. Generally is academic.
So the next question is, what can we then do about it?
That comes from all the finance and operations. Bring the security, everything else. Before they go into the board You know this.
We looked at you, that organic house is really. Well.
Coordination between. Operations guy. Those three people have different priorities. So you're one of the things that I see.
Right, so just the very. So we just go
And how you get it done, yeah. Covering of that.
So I've never seen her step over it, but
He's out there on the floor. He does that.
Generally, some of these. Generally covered. Generally covered.
Much better than. But he's got to. Give him a shot.
They stop everything you're doing to build that.
They get where you.
this is what you told us. Compromise on the 21st of Friday, which is a Friday. This work. We're gonna go into.
Then we have a chance.
And there's multiple airlines like Delta.
3 or 4 years.
And I'll wait again. And with the right timing, like I will go first in the morning.
Right. We just do that.
And we'll probably leave the house at, noon after she has breakfast. In the cab,
All across that junction, and so the people bringing it to you are.
So
And we're finding that as we go.
And you know what?
Right.
Yeah, oh, she's right.
That was on our work plan, so that's how we were brought up.
That's right.
That's right. And we're
So- So, I think,
One of the issues too,
one thing is, even on some of these, there's some.
How to get rid of that one.
when talk about having that. Ask for social.
I understand, but that's not the way, if we, the way we were doing it, yeah, we would have. Yeah.
But like you said, just.
Shut the door.
Yeah, so I think you're like early afternoon and then.
And nobody left.
Yeah. On Saturday, so, and he wants to change the day. So.
Yeah.
We were school, because we were all small.
What's gonna do that? So we did two West End there. Exactly. Then it was, they were taking the other child back to college. Okay. You know, I said, I got me down to three today.
Well, we.
There was no misunderstanding. I said, you changed the, push the whole back. Multiple times there, and I went through, how it changed. And God responds back.
That's one of the things I like about the committee.
I don't know. That's okay. It probably is another. Yeah. Because I got three.
Y'all done over there? Yes.
It's just.
Okay, y'all ready? All right, I'm ready for solutions.
Okay. Just for number one, the meetings are running too long.
Yep.
I think we need to make a commitment that if someone has made your point, that you don't necessarily have to repeat it over again. Because there are 11 of us, and if you talk for 2 minutes on, it's 22 minutes or 3 minutes it's on each topic, and there you got a 4-hour long meeting.
Okay. Let me respond with one thing. Sometimes I think, and I think I put this in here, sometimes I think people think it's important that they say something to make sure the constituents know that they either agree or don't agree. Okay? My feeling about that, having been on a lot of boards, is one way to make sure that happens is to, I know you have your own ways of regularly communicating with your constituents, but I think it's really important to do some sort of either newsletter or something that lays out for folks, here's what the board did this past week or month or whatever it is you want to do. And that way you get the information in front of people. A lot of your constituents aren't watching the meeting. So if you're using it to make your point, I get that. Sometimes we all need to do that because we got to get reelected, right? I get that.
Right.
But, there are other ways to do that than making it the statement during the meeting, making the meeting very long. So I would just encourage you to think of some ways to get information in front of your folks that's not always the public meeting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, what else?
We have
You can make a commitment Let me ask this. When you say next committee, you mean all the board members?
Yeah, we don't need to do that. What you just said is great. Okay, there are other ways.
Yeah.
So, and you acknowledge the fact that we are political beings and some of us may be running for office again. And we feel it's important, but you brought up the idea of alternative ways. That's okay.
Yeah.
So committees.
Okay.
Number two, as much of the work done in committees is discussed again and rehashed during the full board meeting. So we were having a conversation about committee work.
Okay.
The only thing, it was more about committees than committee reports or anything during board meetings.
Okay, let's talk about committee reports during board meetings. Okay, David?
Yeah, as long as I've been on the board, this has been,
Okay,
and it's because the cameras are not on at the committee meetings.
right?
So people ask the same question. Because the camera's on. And
Right.
I don't know how you could stop it. If I knew how to stop it, I
Yeah.
would have done it. But it's not one person. We've had several people
I understand.
do this.
What ends up happening, as y'all know, if you rehash everything that was done in a committee meeting in every board meeting, you're turning the board into a committee to whole. And that's not okay. I mean, it's not okay according to Robert's rules. It's also just not okay in terms of the time and your interview level. So, I think one thing that came up in the interviews is that if you don't go to a committee meeting, it's a really long time before you get information about it. Okay? That the videos aren't posted quickly. So somebody suggested, and I thought this was a great idea, to do the minutes, written minutes. I can't see back there. You're gonna get past the column here. Then I can't see. Okay, that's all right. So if you did written minutes of the committee meetings, understanding that they're draft, for the next committee meeting when you vote on them, give it draft all over them, that's fine. But get out written minutes within 24 hours of the committee meeting so that everybody can read what happened. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
That's not feasible on my behalf.
Okay.
One, because we'll take this week. We had a meeting every single day,
Okay.
including today. We have 2 committees tomorrow.
Okay.
And one on Friday.
And one on
And
Friday.
you're the only person that does minutes
I
for
do the
these?
minutes for the meetings, yes.
Okay, could that be divvied up?
It's.
Well,
We
That's a
can-
discussion.
But that, when we have the amount of meetings that we have,
Yeah,
and then we turn around and we have a board meeting, like this week, we've had committee meetings every day this week, 2 on some days, and then we have a board meeting next week. We're also responsible having all the documents by tomorrow evening
right,
for Tuesday's meeting.
right,
So the amount of work, even divided between 2 people,
right, there's a lot, okay.
is a lot.
I think that because there was a finance meeting that I couldn't make one time, that I was really curious, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
And I wanted it before the board meeting. So I just emailed Molly and she sent me the link. Like, we internally report on, so there's.
Yes,
Right.
we do.
So why
Right.
can't we just we don't have to get it on the county channel takes way too long. But we've got our own internal Zoom recordings of the meeting. So if you want the channel, why can't just send us a link from the Zoom?
We can do that.
and I think one of the,
Yeah, we can send the link out from the Zoom.
Yeah,
That's easy. That's easier and that's quick.
Yeah, then have to wait for county
and I
channel.
think one of the other comments was, and I know this is what you're saying, but, it takes a long time to watch an entire video of a committee. It would be a lot quicker to be able to look down at least the actions that you take.
Okay, but I will say, in a Zoom session, you can just scroll through. So if you have the agenda, and I mean, I did that because I listened to county council or town council today.
Yeah.
And I was looking for one specific vote, and it took me about 3 minutes to find it out of a 2.5-hour meeting. Because you just scroll through and you kind of like, okay, so it's not, and then you can't, when the county council or county channel does it, they have a video transcript. So if you can wait for the county council,
Right,
great.
right.
If not, you can get the Zoom link and you can just sort of scroll through until you
Right.
find what you're looking for. I don't think, and I look, board members, I think we have time for that, and, maybe we can do it if we really need to.
Well, and I think, there are kind of two, I haven't forgotten. There are kind of two things that are going on here. One is, if you haven't seen what happened in a committee, you get to the board meeting, you hear something for the first time, it's like, oh, I didn't talk about that, I don't think I agree with that, or, oh, yeah, I like that. Okay, so you jump in. Well, if you're not on that committee, you can certainly have your input, but you don't want to rehash everything that the committee's already done. So there's kind of a fine line there, okay? The best scenario is that you're up to date on the committee meetings before you get to board. That's the best case scenario. All of us have families and other responsibilities and blah, 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 blah. So I get, if you can't do that, but that's the best case scenario. So that when you go into the board meeting, you're prepared and you know what you're going to hear. And if there's something really specific that you have a question about, if it's at all possible, it would be great if you could send it to Frank and or Tina ahead of time, so that they know that's going to come up and can address it. Okay. So that would cut down a lot of people, at least knew what was coming.
Yeah. Also give us some support too. So if you wonder how they arrive, so then you can really look at the video of that committee meeting, see at least what the members of that committee, what their thought was and what their support was. Cut down on discussion even more at the board meeting, because you vetted the arguments. You're ready to take a side or come up with something.
I'll share, and one thing that I used to have to do, I worked for the state chamber of commerce, and I was a lobbyist. But anyway, and so I had to present to them all of the bills that were coming up in the legislature that affected business in some way, shape, or form, which is almost everything.
Yeah.
And so, I would present a synopsis of the bill. And then at the bottom, I always had to do pros and cons. Now, there were some bills that I knew darn good and well the State Chamber of Commerce was going to be against. Okay, but I had to come up with the pros. And the reason they made me do that was to think about the questions that were going to come up about those issues and try to answer them better. Okay. The reason I'm telling you about that is it might be helpful with the committees if you could figure out a way to have, this action was taken. If it was a, hot issue, we'll just use that term, you could have a way to list the arguments for, the arguments against, and I'm talking a bullet. I'm not talking a paragraph. I'm talking a sentence, okay? So that people know that you took all this up and then you voted. Otherwise, if I feel really differently about that, and I don't think you even talked about it, I'm going to feel some real heartburn about talking about it to board meeting, because I want to make sure you heard that and considered it, but you already did. I just didn't know that. Okay. So I think, thinking about ways to put that kind of information in front of folks so that when they get to the meeting, they actually know what was discussed and, here was that doesn't mean that you don't still need to talk about it and you don't still perhaps need to vote if it's a real issue, but it gives you a little fuller picture of what went on. David, you had your hand up a long time.
All those are good ideas, but I'm not sure it answers this problem. This problem that we have is the people that attend the committee meetings rehash the stuff.
Okay.
And I think that goes with, I don't know why they do it. I speculate. Questions are asked in committee meetings, and then the same questions are asked. Sometimes they're not just questions, they're monologues.
Okay.
They go into value systems. And I don't know how to prevent that, other than get all falling under control.
Well,
and that's unfair. She can't.
It is unfair. And that's the reason I would suggest, and this is coming from me, somebody brought it up earlier, but I would really recommend, and I've done this on a lot of boards that I've been on and worked with, having a parliamentarian. And I would not have one of you as the parliamentarian. I don't think that's fair to the member who's the parliamentarian because it makes you the bad guy or girl, okay? It also makes it look like you have a conflict of interest because you may cut off a discussion and call for a vote based on Robert's rules. And everybody thinks you did it because you didn't agree with something, okay? No. I I realize that this might be a cost issue, and I think you need to consider that. But if you have an outside person that comes in, you all know that you're supposed to be following Robert's rules. That person can kind of throw the red flag based on the rule. It's not based on you as a person. It's not based on this particular issue. This is the rule. Okay? Yeah.
We talked about
Yep.
that. And a couple of things. One, council did that.
Okay.
I think it was how McFadden was hired. I don't think she's still doing it,
Okay.
but it was pretty controversial. The county was wildly mocked for doing it because she charged $2.50 an hour.
Oh
So
my
you
gosh.
figure, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, I don't know what the going rate is,
Yeah.
but you know, if we got a 5-hour meeting, I don't think the taxpayers are gonna be super supportive of that.
If you had a parliamentarian, you wouldn't have a 5-hour meeting.
Right, but I'm just saying, like,
I'm just saying.
well, it's gonna take a little while, but I mean,
Yeah, it
again,
will.
you know, $2.50 an hour. And so, you know, that caused a lot of backlash.
Yeah.
From
can
in the
understand
paper
that.
and from people saying
And I,
that's crazy.
I may be extremely naive. I don't know how much people, are altruistic around here. But I will say that, on at least 4 of the 6 boards that I was serving on at the time we got parliamentarians, it was a pro bono.
Let's find a pro bono parliamentarian.
And they
person.
chopped it up to, pro bono work. But yeah, Tim.
So, Ingrid, to respond to what you just said, actually Helen McFadden, when she came, she gave a 2-hour workshop to the board in August of, it would have been 2020. That was $3.25 an hour.
No, but it was widely reported in the paper that they were paying for $2.50.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you
not
don't
cheap.
want that. I mean, yeah,
No,
I understand. You don't want to do that. But I just, I think it's an objective way
I'd be all about a pro bono.
for everybody, to follow the rules, not to feel that you're picking on anybody in particular or any issue. I mean, we get obsessed about certain issues too. And you need an outside objective voice to have to say. Right,
Nope, I'll model what you're talking about. It's already been said.
Good.
Nice.
All right. Anything, yeah, all right.
I would just say this. If a parliamentarian can help this board, if we gotta spend $250 now. I don't worry about what the public gonna complain about. If they're gonna complain anyway. I don't care what we do, they're gonna complain, and they've been complaining for years. But we need to have something to make board operate effectively.
And help you move forward.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So any other things about this board piece that you want to share? Yes, Steve.
One thing that I mentioned is Frank. One of the reasons board meetings last a long time is staff will give a presentation and we'll find an error in the document. And when we find an error in the document, then that makes, next time I better look at it even more closely. It's got to be vetted before they come into the board meeting to make sure that numbers add up, that if there's a question in what's being present and presented, that there's the pros and cons, if you will, advantages and disadvantages, and so on. And that will do a lot to compress our meetings.
I think the other thing that you need to do, and again, Frank, I haven't been at board meetings, so I don't know this for sure, but I will say that I sort of had a rule of thumb when I had to work with boards that anything that came from staff to the board was 1 page.
Yes.
1 page. And the reason I say that is it not only helps y'all, it helps the staff because it forces them to be concise. And it's a lot harder to be concise than it is to just put everything out there.
So question on that, when you were dealing with contracts and amendments, was it 1 page or did you put the whole thing in there?
If it's a contract, you have to see the whole contract. You have to read it. But if it's like a recommendation or information that you've requested, 1 page.
Presentation, I saw quite a bit here, several places, like presentations instead of PowerPoints, you'd like summaries.
Yep, executive summary.
Is that?
You can take a contract and have it bulleted on 1 page.
You can.
boom, 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 boom. And if there's questions, they can look at the specific bullet and say, I want some more information about the bullet. Most cases, especially we see these contracts, they're standard.
So much of the language is standard.
All the construction stuff is standard.
It is, it is. Yeah, Ingrid, I'm sorry, Ingrid had her hand.
No, but I mean, I am personally very opposed to the PowerPoint, and I've said this before, because a lot of times I get this PowerPoint presentation. If you were to actually boil down the information provided, it would be like half a paragraph. And then I have a lot of questions, and sometimes I'll actually misunderstand the data because it's missing the part where they would talk, the bullet points are for the staff to kind of remind them as they go through. So I really, and I know that they're going to make a PowerPoint, so sometimes it's easier just to print out the PowerPoint. But I think that having the PowerPoint as our documents, it really slows me down.
Yeah. And I apologize for your PowerPoint today. No, I do. I have sort of a rule of thumb that you have to have less than 25 words on slide. Obviously, none of my slides get that except the what, not how. That one's true. But I wanted to quote the book because I felt like, y'all are using the book. I wanted to quote the book. So I apologize.
It's different. You're doing a presentation. A lot of times they're explaining and asking for action based on how.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, to the degree that they can, my recommendation would be, you don't come before the board with anything but a one pager. It's bulleted. I remember, I had a chairman one time that said, Peggy, if you bring more than one page, I'm ready to carry on for a page and read that, so good luck with that. If you have, yeah, he did. He said, if you have a bullet that is more than 2 sentences, I'm not reading past 2 sentences, so good luck with that. I mean, it had to be, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, it really was. You have to really think through and be concise, and it made me better. Because I really had to think about what was important.
Well, just to reiterate, we're not talking about we're talking about preparing for a meeting. Like if you had given me these slides, I don't need to prepare for what you're doing.
Right.
But if you want me to come in already knowing what we're talking about and not asking a bunch of off the wall questions, especially as a new board member, because the other thing is a lot of times these acronyms, I'm like, what
is that? I know.
And I don't want to email Frank and be like, what does MTSS?
Right.
I just lay it out where I can understand it.
Yeah. Well, and you may need, another thing, I have a seminar that I used to do a lot called the Care and Feeding of Board Members. And the idea there is any new board member should receive a packet that has a booklet of acronyms. I'm serious, because it's not fair, for y'all to come in and go, I have no idea what this means, and you feel like an idiot asking, and you're not, but you feel like that. So, there are a lot of things that you can do.
Rachel's
Hey, Rachel. Yes, ma'am.
No worries. I was just going to say, someone mentioned something about the executive summaries, and I had brought that up as an idea for kind of streamlining the process of watching committee meetings, because I know that's difficult for the minutes to get up right away on Robin's part, and then also the video transcript and everything, sitting there and watching it, depending how long it is. Like a little one pager was kind of what my idea was, but don't know if that's what everybody was referring to when they mentioned that executive summary, because I know we're kind of on a different.
No, I think that makes sense too. And I think it might be that you could appoint somebody within the committee to do those one-page summaries. You'd want to run it by the chair, obviously, before you send it to anybody, just to make sure that you get the points that needed to be hit. But yeah, I think the same thing goes for committee meetings as goes for board meetings. You want it right there. Y'all are busy people. You got a lot on your minds. You don't need to have to read, Okay, what else? Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know if we're at this point in the meeting yet, but I'd like to leave this meeting with some type of agreement, how we're going to proceed with OEs in terms of their presentation, because I have a meeting set up. We talked about, and I think everyone's agreed that the OEs, all the subcomponents, is too much, and that asking. If we got there, folks, because those OEs were TEs, and that's how the TEs were done, 12.3. So we got there by doing it that way. So now, at least you know, I feel for myself and talking to other people, it's become very cumbersome to do 12.3, 12.4. Really, it's the overarching statement that should be interpreted by the superintendent. And we still need the
Compliance pieces.
the compliance piece, how we'll know that it's compliant when, and all those, the superintendent shall and superintendent shall not, you know, addressed in the compliance piece versus in what they're doing. And I asked that one because a little selfishly, have an academic committee meeting scheduled for Monday, and I have 4 OEs that are to be presented. 12.4, 14.4, 12.11, 12.12. So if we're gonna, you know, redo this process, I'd like to stop it here and not go, you know, continue, you know, kind of redirect at this point. So that's my question.
Okay,
I'm gonna suggest you can't stop it there because there's not enough time for us to come to an agreement. So you're gonna have to stick with what we currently have in place till something else comes along. You know how long it took to get these, and it was just a merging of ORI and RPEs. So it's gonna take a while, I think, committee gets formed to go through, get it up to the high level
Well, we
and
already have-
minimize it, but I don't think you can stop it. We have to do what we already have in place until we have something else.
But I'm not changing what we have.
yeah, I think what, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
Kathy, but I think what Kathy's saying is, you have OEs up here, and then you have all these little sub pieces. It would not be hard to simply use the superintendent's interpretation and compliance piece at this level and not at each of these individual levels. You could all decide that right now, if you're in agreement with that. If you're not, it's fine. But I mean, you know, that's really the level where you're supposed to be. If you're smiling, talk to us.
Yeah, I would like the opportunity to sit down with the finance committee and say, let's see if we can distill this down to a paragraph.
Yep.
And come back to the full board, say, here's what I suggest for the finance committee.
Okay.
And get feedback from the superintendent. And if it's fine, the full board says, okay, done.
Right?
I don't understand.
Well,
I don't understand what they.
So you want to change the OEs, basically is what you're saying.
I would like to take a look at all the finance related OEs and see if I can, with the committee's help, we said we would come talk about it, and see if we can come up with a paragraph,
the parameters,
the
the
parameters.
side rails.
Say, this is what all these distill down to. And then give that to the superintendent and say, okay, now, given this overview, what's your interpretation of that? And then bring both of that to the full board, the interpretation and the distilled OE, and say, well, what do you think?
So you're basically not rewriting the OE, you're just condensing the
Distilling.
OE. Right. Right? Ingrid, you have a question?
I'm not gonna get into this. I'm confused by the fact that I know you guys spent like 18 months writing the OEs. And now we're talking about stuff. I'm fine, like however you guys want to do it. But what I will say is when I tried to understand this system, I did a fair amount of research, right? These OEs, they're not just Oregon County, Racine, Wisconsin,
Exactly.
Port Olympia, Washington.
Yeah.
This is a fairly standard, I think we added food services, we added some stuff here and there, but this level of granularity is pretty much across the board. Like it's pretty
No, it's
boilerplate.
not. Your level of granularity under the OEs is.
So a lot of these OEs are like verbatim.
Yes, the OEs are,
Yeah.
but that's the up here piece.
So a lot of like, also, like I looked up the one we were talking about, and it had the same, because I know Racine, there's certain aspects of Racine, there's one in.
But what they do
Yeah.
is the superintendent interpretation and the compliance piece is up here.
Right.
It's not all, you don't have that.
I have no
for
idea
every
how much
single
y'all
one of
added,
them.
but I just found in my research that ROEs were fairly similar
The
to a
big
lot.
one, yes, they are, but the way that you're using them is not. Yep,
Okay, so I will make sure that I.
yep.
What is going on? I mean, my mind is blown. So based on what Kathy said, what I'm understanding is that she's talking about the presentation, how they're presented in committee. Not condensing the OEs, like Colonel Dyer said, but how we are receiving them in committee, how they're being presented. Is that the way, that's what you're talking about?
Yes, if I can just use this for an example, if you have your books, it's OE 12 instructional program. At the top is the statement of the OE. The superintendent shall maintain a program of instruction that offers challenging and relevant opportunities for all students to achieve at levels defined in the board's result policies. Okay, that's the OE. Then we have 17, the superintendent shalls. And so what's bogged us down is because these 17 before, I think we had 14, and when we combined 14 PEs and when we combined with 40 county, we ended up with 17. What's bogged us down is that instead of the superintendent giving his interpretation of that general statement, of that OE, and how it's going to be measured and compliance, monitored, he's been, at our direction, we've been doing 12.1, 12.2, 12. So every single one has its own interpretation and its own monitoring. And we found that some of these little things in here are redundant a bit. So it seems to me if we have these major statements that we all agreed on, and then we had the superintendent, the shalls and shall nots. And I think, based on our discussion today, I think that having him interpret, okay, what does this mean to you? That you're going to maintain a program of instruction that offers challenging and relevant opportunities for all students to achieve at the levels defined in our results policy. What does that mean? Knowing that you shall do these things. That
And he would
set
probably
things.
include a lot of those things.
Like executive
Okay.
summary for all of
In
that,
his
for the
interpretation.
17 pieces.
Right.
Yeah,
That's it, just one executive summary for the 17 pieces. That's
Right.
where we are?
right.
Okay.
Okay, hang on. Earl, I know you had something, Nick's got something.
Okay.
I could take the finance OEs and say, superintendent, you will have an annual audit with no findings.
And a balance.
And that would
And a
cover
balance budget.
90%.
And a balance budget.
And a balance budget.
Right, and a balanced budget.
Yep. well,
That would cover all of the below.
Yep,
You have no findings, you're good.
Yeah.
You balance your books, everything is done. But we have, we're gonna gotta go by the procurement code, we gotta do this. But if you don't do that, your audit's gonna find that, and you're gonna have a finding.
exactly.
So why go through all of that?
That's right. And that's the level you're talking about, Dick, and the level you're talking about, Kathy, is the level you want to, yes.
Okay, so I have no skin in this game. I feel bad that, but OE for Racine, which is
Yeah.
another coherent,
Yeah.
I have 18 subsections in there.
Right, but you don't, what we're talking about is you don't interpret and do compliance around each one of the 18.
That's
All right, what Frank would do on that Racine one, okay? Look at the big one at the top.
Yeah.
Do you see that? All right, he would interpret that, and all those little bottom ones would give him a lot of input into how he needs to interpret. So, and I'm just making all this up, but he might say, I'm gonna have a variety of programs to meet the needs for gifted kids, to meet the needs for, underperforming kids, yada, 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 yada.
So this is, if you guys don't mind, indulge me for a second, because I feel like I'm gonna give you a case example here and we can work through it a little bit.
Okay,
So, and I'm not on the academic committee, but so the superintendent or Dr. Strauss presents something in compliance with this OE. And then another board member says, well, but according to number 4, the superintendent shall ensure that the instructional program includes opportunities for students to develop talents and interests in more specialized areas. And I say, I don't feel like what you just presented to me is in compliance now with this section of the OE. Does that render the whole thing not in compliance?
no, if you look in his little book,
And like, if I'm a special.
And actually, I would encourage you all to get this little bit too, because it has lots of great appendices. So in the appendices, it talks about the way to monitor your OEs.
Yeah.
And you can say, when Frank brings you his compliance data, here it is for this OE. You can look at it and say, everything seems to be in compliance except the part for this. And you can use that as your, you can give him okay, you're totally in compliance except for the part right here.
Okay.
You need to work on.
Okay. That's because that helps a lot for me to like understand how this would actually be used.
Right.
I think we're so in the theoretical.
Exactly.
And I got that book on Kindle available
Yeah.
for me to download, and trying to figure this system out.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I have a handle on it. Then we actually try to do something.
I know.
I'm like,
I would encourage you to look at Appendix A and Appendix E in here. I think they're very helpful. They're examples of things, and they're examples of, OEs and formats for him to report to you and things like that. One of the things, and we're getting close on time, so one of the things that came up in your interviews was the fact that there's not a consistent format for the OEs, and that it would be really helpful if there were. So I know there's some formats in here. You might want to think that through, and over time, you don't do it overnight, it's going to take a while. But as you're thinking about all these tweaks, you might want to come up with a consistent format. I think it's easier for the board to look at it.
At the committee, at the meeting on Monday, Aspen sent sent it to Kathy, some formats. So
Good.
we're going to get those and send them out for them to you.
Yeah, there are.
it doesn't
there's
have
a bunch of
compliance
them.
with noted exceptions.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. And there's a great example in there. Yep. Yeah, I'm all about examples, they can talk to me all they want to, but show me examples. That always helps me. So I love the appendices and stuff. All right. Anything else? Go to the order here.
No, we didn't.
So result.
Oh, we didn't give you.
Yeah, what's Kathy's?
All right.
I think, Tricia, you have the
Yeah.
same issue.
I have the exact same
Yeah.
issue. We are having our third operations committee
Yes.
in December. Okay, we're gonna have three come Friday
Yeah.
because there's a litany of things and each one takes so much time. That this makes so much more sense to me. Candace delivered, OE 3 and OE 4, and then, human resources is coming with OE 4, but each one is huge because there's so many subsections. It makes so much more sense that these subsections, this is part of the indicators.
Exactly.
So, we know this is happening because the superintendent shall do this. We know it's happening because the superintendent shall not. So, I'd like to implement this right away.
Well, and what you really need, I'll give you that moment. What you really need is to be able to have, and I know, everybody's doing this for the first time, but the superintendent's interpretation for each of the big ones,
Right.
as well as the compliance pieces for the big ones that will fold a lot of what you're talking about on that, stuff down here in, okay? And that's it.
Right.
And that's what your committee is going to be working. And what you care about is when Frank brings you outcome results under his compliance piece. You also care about the interpretation. You've got all this already figured out, so I think it's going to all be there. But if, for example, he said, I'm going to meet a variety of student needs, including X, Y, and Z, but A is not in there. You can always go back and say, this looks great, except you need to add A. That's all you need to say. You don't need to work on X, Y, and Z. That makes sense?
Yeah. I love the noted exceptions.
Yeah. All right. Yep.
Yeah, I think we kept this agreement and that communication. I think that's what Frank interpreted that it should be interpreted in terms of what we do. So I thought we were doing too much all the time. But at the same time, once they bring that presentation to us and it's individualized and we look at it, scrutinize it, and we get really into what they're doing and a lot of things. I think it just takes too much time and too much staff hours, and it doesn't cover the overall effectiveness of our governance what should be done.
Well, I think it keeps y'all from being effective at the level you need to be effective. Angela? Yeah. Tim?
So with operations, I think another thing that's such a big, or is a time factor with it, is the construction update. Construction update is then given to the full board, so don't have any committees, you know? Well, why should we have a? What? Oh.
Right, you know what, and we had a little conversation about that. The OE actually just says, and I can't find it right now, you know, a monthly construction update that will report these certain things. Monthly status updates on projects that include progress compared to timeline, expenses compared to a budget timeline, and scope integrity.
So if I walk in and say we're on time and on budget,
With the exceptions of.
Yeah,
done.
instead of like, you know.
That's okay.
Yep.
I agree, because it is the clock, operations, and full board.
That's right.
That's right. I get it 3 seconds.
I guess I need to ask this question when Dr. R came back in the room. Will he relay this new process to his staff?
They will be three.
He's gonna outline, is he gonna relay this to his staff? Oh, Dr. R, question for you.
Yes.
Are you gonna relay this information, this new process to your staff?
Already been-
For the operation?
You'll be happy.
They've been knocking on the door, coming in here every 2 seconds, wanting to know just this. But it is something that isn't, I think will be welcomed by them, you know, and I think so I will relay it to them today before we leave.
And can they start with operations on Friday and academics on Monday?
Yeah, I think
Probably
so.
not, because
It's on
OE,
the agenda.
well, finance and technologies tomorrow, and
Yeah.
they've already sent
Yeah.
stuff out. They're preparing operations on Friday, and they've already done their work with this. So the only
There may be-
person that it might affect is academics.
Please talk to
There may be some 1 or 2 around operations that they can.
Right.
But just
We'll just
think,
start the
in a
transition.
week, 2 weeks, it'll all be done, right?
She's already
It's all
done
we
it. She sent
need.
it, so we're
So
presenting it.
Tricia, read it again, so we were talking about the construction updates, okay? They're at the committee,
Yes.
they're at
so-
clock, and they're at the board, that's ridiculous. So this is all that's required, go ahead, Tricia.
OE9 says the superintendent shall ensure that the board is fully informed regarding construction projects. That's all it says. And then under the superintendent shall, monthly status updates on construction progress, projects that include task progress compared to project timeline, expenses compared to budget timeline, and scope integrity to the baseline.
So
So,
what I said was, you can go in and say, we're on time, we're on budget, these are the exceptions. You're done.
Okay, just wait, you just fill it down.
We,
No, I've been asking about.
You know, just to play devil's advocate for a second here. Let's say that you don't do that stuff. Now you say that you're basing that going in with that information in terms of you're building trust of the community to also get possibly another power from the past. All of a sudden, you change these styles of how you're doing things. Then you have questions because people are used to getting them. If I can't get here, I can't here, I can't get here, I get to there, then now you have people questioning and wondering what's really going on, what happened. I mean, you know, so I think that's what David said, kind of makes sense, kind of keep it continuously. And once you redo things, then you can implement these things. But I think putting these changes in overnight could be kind of scary. I just caution that. But in terms of just in terms of not having the construction of it all those times, I'm putting on that. I'm putting devil's advocate on that.
I understand,
I'll leave that there.
and I agree, you've got to think about what your constituents are gonna think about things. I'm not, and I may be part of this, I'm not sure that they know the granular level that you're working at in committees, do they?
You'd be surprised, I believe they do.
They do, okay. Then I think what you explain is the compliance piece is actually gonna cover every single thing you've been doing. Okay? It's just that you're not gonna have a separate OE on each one. You're gonna sort of subsume them under the broader OE, but it's all still gonna be there. I'm sorry, Tricia, did you want to
Well,
respond?
no, I think you bring up a really good point, but I don't know that, let's just talk construction update, it's needed in 3 places. So you have it in committee, you have it in flock,
Right.
and then the report out at the board meeting is, it's been looked at in depth in 2 places. We don't have to go through each thing during the board meeting.
Or if you want, you can just make the report at the board meeting and
Okay, that was
say,
my question.
yeah.
Because in the operations committee, in my opinion, I actually like it in the committee to the
Okay.
board. And I'll tell you, but I'm not, so, I mean, I'm open-minded. But the reason is sometimes you have to ask a lot of questions. Like, I know for my constituents, Hill Pen projects have been a little bit wonky and they're up right now, right? So I have some very specific constituent conduit type questions. If I was staff, I would prefer to hash that out in a committee meeting than in a big public board meeting, but I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Or-
So we do that in
I would
committee.
hash that out one-to-one. with Frank.
That's what I was gonna say.
You
Or
don't need to do it in.
we can
each
have
public setting.
a conversation and I can have,
Exactly.
Corbin present or anybody else to answer whatever question.
Exactly.
Follow up. To me, though, what I'm trying to do specifically on this is when you have a lot of constituent interest, right? I guess I can do it and then report back, some
Exactly.
sort of way. I don't. but-
I don't think that's healthy and accurate, just due to the fact that, it's almost a sidebar conversation that other people can really have interest in it, and now you have an aside, so you still have the question coming to you, because basically, you had it on the side with a couple people, and you got back to a couple to some people, and don't believe it or not, those 2 or 3 people you got back to, they've had that conversation with several other people, and they may not see other people who they've had that conversation with, all of them are thinking the same thing. But you have it publicly, they say, oh, I saw it, they talk about it at the meeting, and you can go to so and so and find that information. So I perceive that to be a little.
You think it's gonna hide something in some way?
Yeah. I don't take that.
Yeah, I
too well to
understand
that.
that.
Yeah, you gotta be very cautious of that, because really, that is the public business.
It is. And I
That's the
think,
public business.
I think the only thing I would say is the big piece will still be completely public. The individual piece that Ingrid's interested in about Hilton Head would be the conversation.
And I guess,
But-
I think the referendum's a little bit special because
Yeah.
that requires a lot more public buy-in than some stuff, because
Right,
we're
right.
gonna have to get them to vote
Right.
for it again.
Okay, Debbie.
To make sure I got this clear picture before I leave here. I agree, go with that high level. But all those bullet points underneath, Frank's gonna report on any as part of his.
Yeah, compliance
Compliance. So
Yes.
what exactly are we saying?
We're saving him doing interpretations, specific individual interpretations.
Of each
Right.
one.
One over the.
Which is not much.
It is an
Oh,
academic.
no, it's ours. Some of those are like,
It's a lot.
40 pages just for.
Just one part.
So I mean, you're gonna report on those things anyway.
In a monitor.
But you report on it on the monitoring report,
Right.
not necessarily on the 40
Right.
pages.
Right.
On that.
I'm not getting the picture here.
Okay, so in, let's say in academics in the instruction piece, one that was up there that had 18 18 little bullets. Right now Kathy's she's getting reports out at one academic committee meeting, like on 18.7, 18.12.
Right.
So instead of just one superintendent's interpretation of OE 12, and then when the monitoring report comes out, it's going to include 1 through 18. All
What's the
in.
difference between a monitoring report and its compliance?
Oh, no,
it's the same
what
thing.
we're talking is superintendent's interpretation of each of those in a
Right.
monitoring report.
Right.
So right now, what we're struggling through is all the time it's taking to do the superintendent's interpretation of
For
each
each one of those,
individual.
Subsect.
But he's gonna have to report on each of those.
Right, but you don't have to.
To be a comprehensive report. And he's gonna have to show compliance with
Right.
monitoring reports. I'm not opposed to this, I'm just trying to see what it is we're saving.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like we're saving anything, because if he reports and it doesn't hit all of those bullets that are now under there as point this, point that, point this, somebody, probably me, is gonna say, you left out something. So.
If I understand correctly, I think what we're saving is interpretations on point 1, point 2, point 3,
Exactly.
point 5, point 6, point 7, and all of that 17 different committee meetings.
Or
what have you.
five,
Or
because
five,
three at each
and then 3 at each meeting. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I think my suggestion would be try it. If you're not saving anything, then, you don't need to continue, but it just sounds like everybody has been way down in the weeds. You're spending, 3 committee meetings in how many weeks? 2?
And about 8 days.
Yeah, that's just nuts.
Because we're going through the superintendent's interpretation of each
Well,
one of
individual
those subsections.
And it was expected also, one of the committee meetings, we only had one thing with emergency, and that was like a 5-minute meeting service. I mean,
Not
so that means
necessarily.
it wasn't really I would consider
That
that.
was November.
That was in November.
December.
December, we will have our 3rd meeting as of Friday.
That
We
was
had a meeting
November.
last week.
The meeting went off.
Okay, let me have everybody back up here. All right, so let's try, if y'all all agree, sounds like you're okay with this. Let's try the big OE interpretation and compliance piece, okay? Let's try communicating that both to staff and our committees. If you get tons and tons of pushback, then, let's revisit it. Nothing's forever. You don't want it to be. But clearly what you're doing right now is not working terribly well for you. So I think it would be good to try something. Okay? All right. Well, I want to thank every one of you for giving us the afternoon. I really appreciate your time. And I hope that all this discussion has been helpful. I know that it's been wide ranging, but I really wanted you to try to generate the solutions that you felt comfortable with. So I hope you're there. I have enjoyed being with you again, and I'm always glad to see each and every one of you. So good luck. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and don't spend it in committee meetings and 7-hour board meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peggy,
Thank you.
Do you have any,